Would you ever run across South America?
I was injured on day one.
Climb the 7 summits?
The whole curtain of rock basically started coming down the mountain.
Trek across Antarctica?
Unbelievable experience, pushing to the absolute limit. I'm at my limit right now.
Or row across the Atlantic Ocean?
We were hit by 2 hurricanes?
2 hurricanes,
and 3 tropical storms.
Big Life is about exploring unique and untouched landscapes, pushing your physical boundaries and testing the limits of danger. Find out what it takes to be an adventure seeker, risk taker, and a high achiever only on Big Life. What drives people to explore? From the first global explorers to more recent adventurers, the vast landscapes of our world have always enticed people to push their boundaries, mentally, physically, and emotionally. But how far can you push, or should you push yourself to experience some of life's biggest adventures? Next on Big Life, meet a few fascinating people who have turned their passion for exploring into a way of life.
Oh, big one, look at that!
George Karunas is a global explorer, adventurer, and storm chaser. He's been chasing tornadoes and storms for over 15 years. George is all about pushing his limits. But the key is knowing when the chase is just too dangerous.
Go! Now that was worth the trek up here. Basically, it's my job to go to the most dangerous and extreme places on Earth, document them, and then show people what I have seen. That's what I do. That's my job. My office is Mother Nature. Ever since I was a kid, I always had an interest in science and nature, and then as I got older, it sort of developed further into an interest in travel, photography, adventure, exploration. And being a storm chaser has allowed me to combine all those things that I love into basically one amazing career.
The impact sound of these hailstones is unbelievably deafening.
Some of the crazy places that I travel all over the world include driving up to tornadoes, flying into the eye of a hurricane, and even sometimes crawling into the crater of an erupting volcano. I do these things because I love nature. I'm not an adrenaline junkie. I don't jump off of cliffs. I don't throw myself out of airplanes every weekend, but I do like to see Mother Nature up close and personal when she's at her most extreme. The region of the central United States that encompasses Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and some of the Dakotas, it's Tornado Alley. That's where most of the tornadoes in the world occur. Up to 800 to 1,000 tornadoes touch down in the central US every year. Most of the time you don't hear about them because most of them touch down in farmers' fields. But if there's one touching down, usually I'm not too far away.
Oh boy, craziness.
A typical day of storm chasing starts with the morning forecast. We have to try and figure out where the tornadoes are going to be, if there's going to be any, sometimes hours or even days in advance. So we have to be very studied in meteorology. So we'll pull up maps, figure out the computer models, and try and decide where we have to go that day. Then we'll continue driving in that direction. Throughout the day, we'll modify our forecast, try and narrow that position down from millions of square kilometers down to a point that might be a mile wide. Once we get into position, usually the storms fire up about 5 or 6 in the afternoon. That's the witching hour. That's when we know the storms are either going to fire or not. And if they do, it's time to put the pedal to the metal and get up close. Navigating around a storm is not easy. You have to find the safe spots, stay out of the giant hail, which can be to the size of baseballs or larger, and get in a position where you're going to be able to see a tornado and not get hit by it.
This is really close. Oh man!
Just this past tornado season, we had this amazing encounter in South Dakota. A large tornado touched down out in an open field, just the way we like it, not affecting anyone. And we watched this thing for almost an hour as it got larger, changed shape, morphed into all these different sizes. This tornado approached this small farmhouse and crossed the road just behind this oblivious driver that was coming the other way and just missed getting creamed by this tornado. I was trying to alert him, had no idea what was going on. Either he was completely oblivious or had to change his pants shortly after. When a tornado was touching down in an open field, it's a beautiful spectacle to behold. But when it hits a town, that's when it really becomes a natural disaster as opposed to a naturally occurring event. And I've seen destruction that has been almost indescribable. Entire towns wiped off the map, one house destroyed while the house beside it remains untouched. It's just mind-boggling what's happening in that chaotic frenzy of a tornado. The most difficult part emotionally of storm chasing is seeing people lose everything and sometimes even lose their lives. When we're chasing a storm, if it hits a town and there's someone who needs help, that's it. We call off the chase and lend help immediately. We're all trained in first aid, and basically that becomes the priority at that moment. Of all the places I travel to and all the phenomena that I get to see all over the world, the most spectacular and the most unique has to be the Nika Crystal Cave in central Mexico. This cave was only discovered 10 years ago, accidentally, by a group of miners. There's a silver mine in central Mexico in Chihuahua, and they were drilling away, and one day they broke into this chamber 900 feet underground, and what they discovered was something that no human eyes had ever seen before. A chamber about the size of a basketball court containing the world's largest crystals. And when I say large, I mean huge. Some of them were 10 meters long, 55 tons, so big that you can't put your arms around them. No one had ever seen anything like this. The environment inside is as deadly and dangerous as it is beautiful. The magma chamber that heated the water that created these crystals also creates an air temperature inside the cave that's 52 degrees Celsius with almost 100% humidity. That combines the heat of the Sahara Desert in the summer with the humidity of the Amazon jungle. Survival inside this cave is impossible for more than about 15 or 20 minutes at a time. When I first went there, I went inside the cave and could only stand it for 12 minutes, unprotected. I was starting to exhibit heat stroke and had to get out immediately.
It's stifling.
To explore the cave in depth, I actually had to wear a special cooling suit. The bottom layer of the suit was a vest that was filled with ice packs to keep my body core temperature cool. Over top of that was this orange coveralls to protect me from the sharp edges of the crystal. And then on my back, I had a backpack with ice canisters and an electric fan inside that would blow cool air over the ice canisters up to a hose and then to a fighter pilot's type mask. And that would help me to breathe chilled air and to cool off my eyes so my eyes didn't get scorched inside the cave. And even with all the protective equipment, I could only stand it in there 30 to 40 minutes maximum at a time. It was spectacular. Imagine Superman's Fortress of Solitude. It's so difficult in the cave to get around because you're scrambling over these crystals. The heat and humidity is so intense and oppressive. Literally, as soon as you walk in the cave, you start to die. Your body is incapable of shedding the heat. You are sweating, but the sweat doesn't evaporate because the humidity is so high. So eventually, if you remain, your organs will overheat and fail, and you will die. So you're on borrowed time from the minute you walk into that cave. But by far, the most spectacular, amazing place I have ever seen. The name of the game is risk management for me. I'm always trying to get close, but not too close, get an amazing shot, but not get killed. You have to mitigate the risk. There's always a certain amount of risk, and I have to learn a lot about the phenomena that I'm pursuing in order to minimize that risk. As a storm chaser, I've seen nature do things that most people have not. And because of that, and because of my experience, I feel that I have a respect for Mother Nature that is earned, deserved. In the grand scheme of things, we are so small, and it only takes a moment. As anyone has seen a disaster on the news, we know that life can change in an instant. Mother Nature, I don't see her as an opponent. I don't see her as a quarry, as something I'm hunting. I see it as my partner. Mother Nature is my co-pilot as I'm trying to document these different things. And we work hand in hand. And there are days when she cooperates with me, and there are days when she doesn't. And I really want to stay off of her naughty list, so to speak.
Coming up next, we'll meet another explorer who is very familiar with extreme adventures and death-defying places. Living the big life is all about finding your limits and then pushing past them. It's about fulfilling your true passions in life, and no one knows this better than Kevin Vallely. As a family man and an architect, holding down a regular life is in great contrast to his other, more risky pastimes. Kevin and his team have accomplished many incredible feats, from trekking across the frigid wastelands of the South Pole to running coast to coast across South America, each time taking carefully calculated risks through each of their adventures.
The Chilean police are going to allow us and escort us through this abandoned tunnel. So cool.
First adventure I ever did was skiing across Alaska's 1,860-kilometer Iditarod Trail. It's the first time anyone ever skied it. Myself and two teammates did that, and it opened my eyes to adventure. Beyond that, I've went to the jungles of Sumatra, and I followed jungle patrollers there atop huge Asian elephants after poachers and illegal loggers. Went to Java, Indonesia, attempting to summit all its 10,000-foot volcanoes, sadly coinciding with 9/11. So I was in the midst of a jihad without realizing it, and ultimately in the end was forced out because people were threatening my life. And that really opened my eyes to things that can potentially go wrong on expeditions. South Pole Quest was my inaugural expedition with I2P. Myself, Ray Zahab, and Richard Weber would ski to the South Pole. Our intent was to share it with thousands of school kids across North America, somehow from the ice of Antarctica. And in doing so, we secretly had this ambition of breaking the world record in getting there. It was an amazing expedition, and we did share it, and so many people followed, and so many kids were inspired, and every night we would be answering questions via our email and setting up, voice blogs, all thanks to satellite technology. And it really proved to us the sort of magnitude of what you can do as sort of an I2P expedition, and it really sort of jump-started these extreme expeditions that Ray and I have been embarking on subsequently. Traversing Antarctica is really a unique environment. There's no life out there. You're basically dropped down at the edge of the continent on the sea ice, and then the plane buzzes away, and it's, see you guys, we'll see you at the pole. And it's 1,130 kilometers across arguably the most barren terrain on Earth to get to the South Pole Station. It's very intimidating psychologically knowing there is no life. The only life in Antarctica is on the periphery. Obviously there's, sea life. Nothing else. On the continent itself, it's a big slab of ice, and the only life is a half-inch insect that lives on some distant peak that was blown there, in theory, and eats bacteria. There's nothing else. So we were really the only 3 beating hearts crossing that continent. Very unique experience that I feel very fortunate to have had. Not a lot of people can be in a position knowing that, wow, there's nobody. And maybe a good thing too, because we had been stuck in the same underwear for actually 2 months, so maybe it was good there was no one else around. At the edge of the continent, the ice cap bends and breaks as it enters the sea, and there's crevasses. And these are like bottomless abysses in the glacier. And there's snow bridges across them, bridges of snow that you traverse, yet the hole is bottomless. So you cross these things, hoping that bridge don't break. We would go, and sometimes you'd be crossing them, and they'd be as wide as a street, some of them. And you'd be going, and your pole would puncture through, and you'd see this little black hole looking down, and knowing that the bridge is this thick, and you're on it, thinking light thoughts. And if it went, you were going into the abyss, never to be seen again. So yeah, we had some serious issues in the first few days. We were very tense. We got through that, and then it became more just the struggle to get there with very cold temperatures and very high winds. The trip for us was 33 days, 23 hours and 55 minutes, just 5 minutes short of 34 days. The previous record had been 39 and a half days, I believe. So we were 6 or 7 days faster than the previous mark, which was amazing. Like, we were absolutely stunned by that, but that wasn't our objective. Breaking the world record was a really nice thing to boot, but it was just being out there and actually sharing the experience was the most amazing part of all.
Unbelievable experience, pushing to the absolute limit. I'm at my limit right now. It's completely messed up.
Two years ago, Ray Zahab and I, after breaking a world record to the South Pole, decided we wanted another major I2P trek. And this trek was trying to traverse Lake Baikal in Siberia. Now, Lake Baikal, it's a frozen lake in wintertime. It holds the most world in a single place. It holds actually 20% of the world's fresh water in this one lake itself. It's over a mile deep, deepest lake in the world. And we thought it'd be an amazing idea to try to traverse this lake. Fastest time ever had been 21 days, I believe, and we succeeded in doing it in 13 days. So we took our, fast expeditionary style to this lake, hauling sleds, fully unsupported, in arguably among the nastiest conditions out there. Lake Baikal is extremely cold in Siberia in February, March, minus 40 degrees, high winds, fully exposed. There was a lot of challenges, and weather was primary, as in temperatures, wind conditions. The wind would be so strong at some points that it would actually blow our sled from behind us to be in front of us, if you can imagine that, as we're moving forward. It was really tough, and we were completely out there. And that's one of the psychological components of a unsupported expedition, is that if something goes wrong, there's no one to take care of you. You've got to take care of yourself. So you're always aware of that. When you're being hit by huge storms, when you're dealing with outrageously cold temperatures, you're always conscious of that.
It's pretty serious that I went outside and nearly died.
It's glare ice, a lot of it, and it's very disconcerting when you're on it because it looks like you don't even know how thick the ice is. But it's glare ice for huge sections. So we had crampon underfoot with literally running shoes of sorts. In the end, we averaged over 50 kilometers a day. It's easy to run when it's that cold because it's the only thing that keeps you warm, you see. When it's minus 40 and you get up in the morning, being in a tent, it's miserable. So you get out there and you're cold, you're always cold, and you sort of bundle up, you get your sled going, and then you start to run. And it's like, wow, I'm starting to feel warm. It's the only time I felt warm all day. You just do it, you keep moving. And obviously, as you're confronted with difficult conditions and jumbled ice, you trek over it and move your way through. But when we had good conditions, we would run and hauling sleds. It was pretty amazing. I've done a lot of adventures. My most recent was running across South America, up and over the Andes, attempting to run over an ultramarathon a day every day as I crossed South America. The intent was to run our journey from the Pacific coast in Chile up and over the Andes to Buenos Aires on the Atlantic coast. And a journey of roughly 1,500 kilometers, attempting to run anywhere from 70 to 100 kilometers per day. Amazing trip, amazingly challenging, and for me, an eye-opening one because I ended up getting injured and have to deal with an injury as I went through the trip.
Just a sharp pain and a pop in the arch of my foot.
On day one, at the 45-kilometer part of day one mark, I got a really bad foot injury. My plantar fascia, the arch of my foot, had a jabbing pain, and I had to stop. And we stopped for the day, sort of recouped. And it was a very serious injury, in fact, one that I was quite certain I was not going to be able to continue with. The next day I attempted to continue on, and I made it 30 kilometers. And finally the injury went into my Achilles, and I got to a point and I said, I'm not going to injure myself here permanently trying to do something to inspire others to be physically challenged and to do their thing. So I said, I'm going to back off here, but I'm not going to quit. We were a supported expedition, meaning we had camps each day, we had drivers, we had vehicles. I had the ability to be able to step out and then reintroduce myself through the expedition. And from that point forwards, it went from being the next day, I ended up doing 35 kilometers through the Andes. And I slowly built it up to being 40 kilometers a day, 50 kilometers a day, even 60 kilometers per day. And all through this time, Ray was running continuously. And he worked himself up to one day, he did 100 kilometers in one day. So it was a really interesting expedition. I would describe myself as probably being quite driven, focused on what I want to do, but also someone who chooses to do the things he wants to do. And I guess I'm not following the normal path people take in some respects. Anyone who defines himself as an adventurer probably isn't following that path, because they're pursuing things they really want to do themselves. That's the one thing I love about my life, is that I just want to do the things I want to do. Life's too short to be doing things that other people want you to be doing. So I describe myself as someone who's maybe seizing the day and living life to the most.
Big Life continues after the break with a look at the ultimate risk takers. A young couple's quest to complete a full circumnavigation of the world only on human power. Every young couple must face new challenges before a marriage. But newly engaged Colin and Julie's trials are a bit more risky and extreme than most. After Colin circumnavigated half the world on human power, Julie is set to join him on a 5-month trip, rowing across the Atlantic Ocean. Can this couple survive the physical demands of the journey, the unexpected hurricanes, and each other?
We're almost at 3 months now, and we're only halfway across the Atlantic Ocean. We've just been hit by our 3rd hurricane a few days ago, which blew us way backwards, way off course.
I just love the idea that nobody had done it before. Nobody had gone around the world entirely by human power, and it promised to be a great way to explore some of these areas that you'd never otherwise visit.
I think there's a few things that drew me to this expedition. Part of it is I wanted to undertake a big adventure. I really wanted to push myself and see what I could achieve for my own interest and curiosity.
Oh, look at you, Barbara. Oh, you like that, don't you?
Another part was an interest in the ocean. My background is in science, and I've always been fascinated with the ocean environment. And there's really no other way to experience that kind of intimacy with the ocean than if you were to spend 5 months slowly crossing it.
The expedition took 2 years in total. That was starting from Vancouver, ending in Vancouver. 43,000 kilometers in total around the world. 5 different modes of human-powered transportation: canoeing, rowing, skiing, cycling, of course. The longest leg was crossing the Atlantic Ocean, which took 5 months, just Julie and myself in the rowboat. Starting out in the expedition, I was with a friend. His name was Tim Harvey. From North America, we crossed the Bering Sea, which is about a 400-kilometer stretch of ocean. And then once we got into Siberia, that was even tougher, just because of the extreme temperatures we're dealing with.
Today is a freezing, typical day in Chukotka. It seems to snow and blizzard all the time, with minus 35, minus 40-degree temperatures. It's chilly, it's freezing, and this is our home now. This is where we live.
And unfortunately, things just didn't work out, and cracks started forming in our relationship. And in Siberia, we ended up traveling separately, and at that point I was alone for almost 4 months. Fortunately, Julie was able to join me in Moscow.
The cycling leg, it was pretty fast-paced because we had a deadline to make in order to cross the Atlantic Ocean, so we had to keep to a pretty rigorous schedule. At the same time, we traveled through a lot of beautiful areas in France and Germany and Austria and Spain and Portugal, so it was very pleasant and scenic too. When we arrived in Lisbon, we purchased a rowboat that we bought off the internet. It was a second-hand boat, so we had a lot of work to do to get it ready for the ocean. Finally, we got the boat prepared, and then we had to fill it with everything we needed for the ocean crossing. 5 months of food, and because of course we're exerting so much energy, it's burning twice as many calories as we normally would. We didn't have a support boat, so if we just forgot something, we'd have to go without, so it was really important to be properly prepared.
You're doing a lot of rowing. You get up in the morning and well, we're taking shifts all the time. So one person's in the oars, one is inside eating, sleeping, whatever. And we're doing about 10 to 12 hours each behind the oars. But you become more relaxed as the weeks wear on. You start realizing that, you know, this boat is seaworthy, and your mind just sort of accepts this new world is now your home.
That was like a foot away from us. I opened the door and I looked inside and I saw that all I saw was the side of the freighter.
2 days into the trip, we were almost hit by a freighter. Just a big wave and this wall of steel behind it. And it was actually the wave off the front of the freighter that pushed us to the side.
It was heading straight into our bow, and it just missed our bow by a foot.
I had a lot of fears when we started this journey. The biggest worry was the Atlantic Ocean. It's a huge crossing, almost 10,000 kilometers. My biggest worry was the weather. Hurricane Vince came right over us. At the worst of it, we were in waves that were about 50 feet high with wind speeds that were well over 100 kilometers an hour.
To protect our heads, we've actually fastened helmets, which we've made from pantyhose, and we've stuffed the interior with clothing. And so if we do end up banging our heads against the wall, it will actually protect us somewhat. Land ho! 120 days out at sea, and behind me is land.
When we finally reached land, it was everything we imagined. It was tropical, fresh fruits and vegetables, and good foods were all there. But
except we couldn't walk. That was the only problem.
Yeah, you can't walk. After you've been in the boat for that long, you literally can barely walk.
Well, I think it definitely made our relationship that much stronger. When we went on this trip, we were engaged, and I guess you could say it was the ultimate litmus test. I mean, either things were going to go well or they were going to fall apart, and so we got married, and so obviously they went quite well.
The boat is tiny, and basically a way you can replicate the situation at home is find your best friend or your significant other and go under the kitchen table and sit there for 5 months, which is pretty much what it's like. I mean, your world is that limited, and the most important thing, of course, is having a strong relationship to start with and being able to communicate if problems do arise, being able to work your way over it. Overall, I think we were quite fortunate in you know, the fact that we made it to shore and we still loved each other.
Would you ever run across South America?
I was injured on day one.
Climb the 7 summits.
The whole curtain of rock basically started coming down the mountain.
Trek across Antarctica.
Unbelievable experience, pushing to the absolute limit. I'm at my limit right now.
Or row across the Atlantic Ocean.
We were hit by 2 hurricanes, and 3 tropical storms.
Big Life is about exploring unique and untouched landscapes, pushing your physical boundaries and testing the limits of danger. Find out what it takes to be an adventure seeker, risk taker, and a high achiever only on Big Life. It takes a real thirst for adventure and exploration to venture into the great white tundra of the Arctic and Antarctic landscapes. From the great polar explorers Shackleton, Mawson, and Amundsen to Robert Peary, the first person to reach the geographic North Pole, the harsh, wintry landscapes have been places of extreme beauty, invaluable research, and ever-impending danger. But whatever their reasons, people are drawn to the poles, and Laurie Dexter knows these regions only too well, having traveled more than 100 times to the North and South Poles.
They work on ships and take people to the most remote parts of the world, primarily the polar regions. I grew up in the Shetland Islands, which is the north of Scotland. And at the present time, I live in a very small community in the Northwest Territories called Fort Smith. It's about 1,000 kilometres north of Edmonton. I've been an adventurer all of my life. Growing up in the Shetland Islands, I lived in a very, very remote conditions. My main entertainment was reading, and my parents introduced me to adventure-type children's books. So my heroes as a boy were people like Shackleton and Scott and Nansen and a lot of polar region explorers, and that was really the inspiration which has led to my present lifestyle. I've been doing all sorts of expeditions all of my life. So I've skied across Greenland, I've skied across the Arctic Ocean from one side to the other, from Siberia to Canada. I've skied to the South Pole. I've done numerous sled hauling trips in both the Arctic and the Antarctic across some of the most remote islands in the world. Now, as an expedition leader, I've been doing this for almost 20 years. Most of the trips I've done have been with Quark expeditions. Somewhere between 110 and 120 trips to Antarctica, which I'm guessing is more than probably anybody else in Canada. And I've done about the same number in the Arctic northern regions as well. We come into port, passengers arrive in the middle of the afternoon, we set sail, and in case of the Antarctic area, we have to have 2 days crossing over some of the roughest seas in the world, known as the Drake Passage. And then we try and do a couple of landings a day. We'll have breakfast, we'll go out, we'll take people ashore, drop them off amongst a bunch of penguins. And it's all by zodiac, because these are very remote locations. There are no docks, there are no towns, it's just isolated beaches. I spend most of my time divided between the Arctic and the Antarctic, and one of the most common questions that people ask is, what's the difference? Or are they the same? And in fact, there are more dissimilarities than there are similarities. The Arctic is an ocean surrounded by land, the Antarctic is a land surrounded by ocean. The Arctic has people living, has had for millennia. The Antarctic has never had Aboriginal peoples of any sort. The Arctic has a wide variety of wildlife, all living in a very tight system of predation. The Antarctic has very few species, but living in vast numbers. And that's why the Antarctic is so rewarding for people. There are no land predators in Antarctica. So as a consequence, anything on land is not likely to be afraid of us. And so you have that more intimate access to nature in the Antarctic as over against the Arctic. In Antarctica, when we take people ashore, we can pretty much let them go on their own resources. In the Arctic, we have to carry guns. Polar bears are the ultimate predator. It's not really that polar bears want to eat us, but they're enormous animals, they're very curious, they're very intelligent, and they will approach us. And so if we see a polar bear on shore, we don't go ashore. If we are on shore, then they can pop up. They're like a white ghost. They can come out behind a rock, they can swim across a channel, and they suddenly are there. So in the Arctic, we have to accompany people. I've never had to shoot one, thank goodness. It would be a devastating thing to have to do, but it happens. People have had to, and I've actually had to fire my rifle quite a few times to scare them away. One of the biggest challenges we face is the weather. You're in remote places where the weather is really quite unpredictable. You're often landing in a bay or a fjord, and you know the general weather pattern, but these little places create their own weather patterns, especially in Antarctica where you have big glaciers coming down. And the winds the air in the upper levels of these glaciers gets cold, and cold air falls and it begins to roll down the glacier, and it picks up speed and it just hammers you off the shoreline. These are called katabatic winds, and they can take you by surprise. A number of times I've been in a situation where we've had people on shore and suddenly the weather has changed and the wind has picked up and it's gone way, way, way above our normal operating speed, and you're having to be out there in small zodiacs bouncing around, and it can be quite scary at times. I've talked a lot about working in the Antarctic, but in the Arctic, when we do the trips on the icebreakers, we're often just in ice, so instead of zodiacs, we're using helicopters. I've had an occasion where we were on shore, we had a lot of people on shore, the helicopter was doing a shuttle back to the ship. This was with a very big Russian helicopter that normally carries 20 people, and we had 37 people on shore. The weather was closing in, the fog was coming in, and the pilot called to say, I can't continue, I can't come back, this will be my last trip. But that meant that we would have basically 17 people left on shore, who knows how long, maybe overnight, so on. Called to the pilot and said, put them all on. So we did. We put everybody on and got them all back to the ship just as well, because I don't think the fog lifted for 2-3 days after that. The one thing that still impresses me is the power of nature. We were coming across the Drake Passage last December, and we hit a really big storm that peaked at over 100 knots. Now, that might not mean a lot to some people, but 64 knots and above is hurricane. So 100 knots, it peaked almost twice hurricane force. And it was like watching a wall, just like watching huge walls of water coming towards you, breaking the crest, breaking over, and the ship going straight into it, because you couldn't go side on, or it could, in a small ship like that, it could roll you over. And just the captain took it off autopilot, and he just steered every single wave, following the waves. That was quite scary. When we go to Antarctica, people often look around and they see these amazing mountains and the wildlife, and they say, well, you must never get tired of this. Not really, you don't get tired of it, but you know, you get accustomed to anything. So I'm not really excited about seeing another penguin, but I still remember the very first time I did, and I realized that that's what they are feeling. So the thing that really is most rewarding about working for a company like Quark Expeditions is the people. Because every time we get a new group of passengers, we might be quite tired, we've just finished a rough crossing of the Drake Passage, you haven't had much sleep, but you meet all of these wonderful people coming on board, full of enthusiasm, a bit excited, a bit nervous, and you just feed off their energy. And that's really what keeps me going in this work, is the rewards of working with people. One of the interesting things when I think about myself, because I've done a lot. I mean, I've done a lot of extreme running. I've run 600 kilometers in 6 days. I've run 100 kilometers in 8 hours. I've done 10 marathons in 10 days. And of course, I've done a lot of extreme expeditions. When people meet me, it's kind of disappointing, eh? I mean, I'm not that big, I'm not that powerful, but I've still managed to do all of these things, and I think that has a bigger appeal to a wide variety of people. You don't have to be genetically gifted, you can just be quite small and ordinary. You can still push your limits way beyond what you think they are.
Big Life continues with a look at the South Pole and a woman's harrowing tale of survival in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Megan McGrath has always enjoyed the outdoors, growing up in rural Sudbury, Ontario. She joined the Canadian Forces to become an aerospace engineer, but her sense of adventure was limitless, and she quickly set out to do more exploring. Following in the footsteps of famous Antarctic explorers Ernest Shackleton and Douglas Mawson, the vast white landscapes of the South Pole were calling her name.
I've completed both versions of the 7 Summits Climbing Challenge. I've participated in the Marathon des Sables. I skied to the North Pole, and recently I became the first Canadian to ski solo to the South Pole. The idea for the ski to the South Pole came when I was on Mount Everest in 2007. We were getting prepared and ready for the summit push, and I was reading a book about a normal person who wanted to ski to the North and South Pole. And I literally had a eureka moment. I was always wondering what I would do after climbing Mount Everest. I knew I had to do something, or wanted to do something. I always had in the back of my mind a polar expedition, but now that I saw this, what it took to make happen, I realized that it was something I could actually achieve. It took about 2 years of planning to make happen, but in 2009, I was on my way to the South Pole. My journey to Antarctica took me from Patriot Hills, a base camp in Antarctica, to the South Pole. The distance was approximately 1,095 kilometers. I estimated that it would take 45 to 60 days. It ended taking me 40 days. I had just over 200 pounds worth of gear with me, and no injury. To be honest, one of my main concerns, because I was going to be out there alone, was crevasses. I had been assured that no one falls in crevasses in the South Pole. It just doesn't happen. I took off the first day from Hercules Inlet, which was the start point, and I was given my land features to shoot toward. There were 2 nunatuks, or peaks of mountains sticking out of the snow, to go through those. It's also notorious when you're coming out of Hercules Inlet that the route is very steep, actually uphill, coming out of that particular area. And with your load at its heaviest, I skied the first day and decided by the end of it that there's probably a better way to be more efficient here. The next day I woke up and I decided to try booting it for a while. Booting it, I mean taking off the skis and just using my boots that I was wearing, my polar boots. I tried it out and I got going that morning, and I was doing pretty good progress, but you know, it was getting on to about 10 o'clock in the morning that day, and I want to take a break. It would be my first break of the morning, and I looked down at my compass harness, which was holding my compass and telling me where to go, and I just looked up, and before I knew it, I was up to my armpits hanging in a crevasse. Looking out at Antarctica at a view that you just don't want to be looking at Antarctica. Well, as I kicked behind me, and I kicked in front of me, and I kicked beside me, I came to the realization that my feet were kicking into a giant void. I was basically hanging up to my armpits on a ledge of snow that was more than likely going to break through at any moment. I had a few thoughts go through my head relating to my family and how much I love them, of course. In a few moments, I'm blinking 1 minute, and the next I'm breaking through that ledge and falling into the crevasse. And I was pretty sure it was over. Not only could I not see, I couldn't breathe. I had all this stuff in front of my nose and mouth. It was suffocating me. My worry didn't become falling at that point. My worry became breathing. I had a very momentary freak out, like split second, and I went, wait. I'm a high altitude climber. I'm used to working in low oxygen environments. So I was able to use that as my rationalization. But I looked down, and to my astonishment, there was a snow bridge beneath me. In a crevasse that sometimes snow gathers, and it creates a ledge or a bridge. Now it was still quite a ways, and I realized that my weight from dropping I would punch through that bridge and continue falling into the hole. But frankly, I didn't really have a choice. And I fell onto the snow bridge. And I remember landing and going, I don't want to move, and I want to move to somewhere else right away. And just out of the corner of my eye, I saw this kind of slope that seemed like it had a bit more hard-packed snow on it. And I leaped up onto that. And then I stood there, again, not moving. And then I realized, okay, it seems pretty sturdy. So I walked very carefully along the bottom of the crevasse, climbing under and around big blocks of snow. And I spent the next while trying to climb out of these sheer ice walls. I remembered that I had my satellite phone. I had an Iridium phone that I used for communications. And it was in the bag that had come down with me into the crevasse. And I wasn't very hopeful that it would work, but it seemed like, why don't I get rid of that option, you know, flush it out, and then try the more dangerous option of trying to climb out again. So I went back very carefully, and I came back to my high point, and I had this phone, and I turned it on, and I have all 5 bars. The phone worked from the bottom of this crevasse. I didn't believe it. I almost thought it was this weird joke. I connected with Patriot Hills Base Camp. I explained my situation, and they were so professional. So I'd spent 2 hours in the crevasse trying to get out by myself, but the next 6 hours was just a matter of what they said they were going to come and get me, and I was keep getting updates on their progress. I was so grateful, not only for the Iridium phone because it worked in the most insane circumstance, I'm also especially grateful to the folks that came and got me. These were employees of Antarctic Logistics and Expeditions, and without them, I wouldn't be here today. I ended up with cracked ribs out of this situation, but it didn't impede me from trying again. I set out after 5 days and began my expedition from Patriot Hills and went to the South Pole. I was out there every day skiing along and pulling this heavy sled and all by myself. It was really absolutely fantastic from that perspective. But to be honest, the trip did take on a different tone from when I first set out from Hercules Inlet. But then I had this scare and I really wanted to finish. That's what it boils down to. Sometimes I would take the time to really appreciate what I was experiencing. I'd take the time to look out and go, wow, you know, like, who else gets to see this day after day after day? and I really tried to appreciate that. It was just I was really lucky and fortunate to be experiencing it. And I mean, that wouldn't have been possible without so many people getting involved, and but also I think some creating opportunity for myself and having other people support that opportunity. That's how this all came together, and I really appreciated that.
Would you ever run across South America?
I was injured on day 1.
Climb the 7 summits?
The whole curtain of rock faces are coming down the mountain.
Trek across Antarctica?
Unbelievable experience, pushing to the absolute limit. I'm at my limit right now.
Or row across the Atlantic Ocean?
We were hit by 2 hurricanes, and 3 tropical storms.
Big Life is about exploring unique and untouched landscapes, pushing your physical boundaries and testing the limits of danger. Find out what it takes to be an adventure seeker, risk taker, and a high achiever only on Big Life. What drives people to explore? And what does it take to keep going day after day when the final destination seems almost unreachable? Endurance challenges have gained in popularity around the world, and they truly are grueling races that test you to your very core, breaking down your body, testing your mental fortitude, and chipping away at your spirits. Next on Big Life, meet 3 adventurers who have one thing in common: their unwavering drive to champion the various endurance challenges they each set out to accomplish, across some of the most unforgiving terrains, from the arid South American jungles to the bitter cold of Alaska. But first, Brett Rogers took on the difficult challenge of rowing himself and his team down the Mississippi River on an extraordinary 110-day trip.
My name's Brett Rogers, and I'm a river rat. up in the country, we made our own fun, so I've always been into some sort of adventure my entire life, whether it was building a fort out in the woods, or I think I built my first log raft in grade 1. So my entire life I've always been up to trouble outside. I never ever thought the Mississippi River would be a river I would want to go down, but the more I started reading about it, I really became interested with the Mississippi. The idea for the Old Man River project was we would build a historic York boat, which was a boat that was used in northern Canada during the fur trade, and row down the river and make a documentary about it, but at the same time try to promote this charity down in Louisiana that was standing up for fresh water. And that was really a natural byproduct because we were living on this river, we had to find our drinking water on this river, and when we're traveling through the richest country in the history of human civilization, but we could never drink the water. So it was a really natural story to tell. 3 years later, where I was able to raise the resources and put together a team and pull off the expedition.
Hold on, guys, hold on! It's okay, we're okay, we're okay!
I wanted to have a team that everyone brought a specific skill. So I had a photographer. I was teaching at Conestoga College. I brought one of my students. She was the only female on the expedition, and because she could shoot and she was an interesting person. Cliff, my first mate, could build anything, and we had done an expedition up north before, so I knew I could depend on him. First person I met when I was backpacking in Europe, an Australian that I had kept in contact with. I wanted to bring someone else on board that was strong and interesting, so I asked him, and he flew all the way from Australia to go on the expedition.
I read in an email from Brett that said the first bit might be a little bit slow because there's some portages, and I was like, oh well, that sounds pretty good, don't really know what that is. I'm sure we'll work it out. I found out that actually portaging is carrying your boat across dry land. Thought it was more about going with the flow of the river, maybe putting up a sail, none of this carrying it rubbish.
The Mississippi River is the third largest watershed in the world. It drains water all the way from Montana, all the way to New York State and 2 Canadian provinces. The river itself, the route we took, was 4,000 kilometers from Bemidji, Minnesota, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. It ended up taking 110 days, but we did the last 2,000 kilometers in about 5 weeks, mainly because we encountered a giant flood towards the end of the expedition and we were able to row a lot quicker. On all my expeditions, we've always built a vessel. That's kind of what I do and how I make it unique.
I think once we get past all the portages, the York boat will be a huge advantage over a canoe or a kayak or anything like that. But no doubt, for the beginning, these portages are going to be tough.
No one had seen a York boat before, and it really captured the imagination of everyone we met. It looked really cool, and it was a high-performance vessel. And it was just an awesome boat to build, and when you build something and then you put your life on the line by going in it, I don't know, it just takes the expedition to a whole new level.
Build rhythm, build bread, get on a bit portage time!
The York boat weighed about 1,000 pounds empty. It was 32 feet long with a 7-foot beam, which means how wide it is across. It was a flat-bottom vessel, which meant that we could travel in very shallow water. And also the idea of building a Canadian boat, the York boat, which was the main vessel for the Hudson Bay Company for 150 years, and taking it into America. So it's kind of like a Canadian invasion of design, going down America's greatest river. The typical day was wake up before the sun came up, pack up our boat, get on the water, row for an hour or two, then eat. And we would row anywhere from 8 hours to 15 hours, all day long.
Broke a centerboard.
Nice steering, Magnus.
Yeah, initially, when we started the expedition, it took us 5 hours every morning to pack up. 2 months later, we could do it in 40 minutes. And we had to because the days were getting shorter and we were extremely behind schedule. So we became very efficient and we would row in 15-minute rotations. We had an egg timer. We would turn the egg timer on every 15 minutes, it would go off and we would rotate. Well, the Mississippi River is really broken up into 3 sections. The headwaters, where there's dams that you have to portage around. Then there's the locks and dams from St. Paul all the way down to St. Louis. So there's 31 locks and dams. And then from St. Louis down, it's a free river. And then it's a whole different environment. So at the beginning, our main challenge was we had to get around these dams, basically going on a river that was like the Credit River or the Grand River. Not very wide, maybe a foot deep. And you have this big 1,000-pound, 32-foot boat that you're trying to get down. So the water levels were extremely low. Then we had to come up to these dams and we were thinking, okay, you know, the map here says we have a canoe portage that should take us 1 kilometer. Well, then you get there and realize, well, there's no way we could pull our boat up this steep embankment. We got to pull out where a motorboat might pull out. So we ended up doing portages that were 5, 6, 7, 8 kilometers long. And then after that, from the Twin Cities to St. Louis, the river's basically 31 lakes. Behind every dam, there's a giant lake 10, 20 kilometers long. So there's no current for the next half of the river. And so that was really slow. And then finally you hit St. Louis and it's like being on an actual river. No dams, free river all the way down. And then the challenge there became, well, you have all these dangers because we encountered a flood. So everything was flooded out. There was nowhere to camp. The current was extremely quick. And so the challenges became much more like being out on the Yukon River or the Mackenzie River. You have no idea what's in front of you. And when you're rowing at 10 kilometers an hour and you hit something in a wooden boat, it can cause a lot of damage.
Hard on board. Everybody together! We're running the rock.
Oh. We beat up our boat twice, and twice we had to pull our boat out and fix it. The first time we did it in a guy's garage. We spent 5 days, fixed it up, thought we had everything under control, and 48 hours later, we busted it all open again, but luckily we were parked beside a boat factory, and we brought the boat in and they fixed it for free.
This is what we needed at the beginning.
You know, there wasn't one day that stood out as a major mental challenge, but the entire month of October stands out as that moment where it rained pretty much every day for a month. It was extremely cold. We're in an open boat, so we were getting rained on. 2 of our cameras broke. Our wall tent was soaking wet. Going to bed every night in a wet sleeping bag. Those 3-4 weeks were extremely trying. You know, many times you're sitting there rowing, especially as the expedition leader, thinking, what am I doing out here? This is ridiculous.
It's just been cold, it's been rainy, I feel like crap.
The one specific challenge that we had for 110 days was where do we get our drinking water? And we knew it going in, but it was still really frustrating to be like, you know, we're on this freshwater river and we can't drink it. But at some points we actually ran out of water and had no choice but to use the water to cook dinner and even drink it.
Mississippi, clean water.
Probably not the best thing to do, but it was just a reality that we faced.
Tastes like our water jugs, plasticky.
In North America, we don't really think about that. We just go to the tap, turn it on, and don't think. But on the Mississippi River, you're always thinking about where will we find water next.
So after 110 days, 10 states, many trials and tribulations, we've reached the Gulf of Mexico.
Expeditions in general, when they are done, are the most anticlimactic experiences you can ever go through. And the Mississippi River was no different. When we reached the Gulf of Mexico, you would think we'd be really happy and you would have this amazing feeling, and it was just kind of like, oh, thank God that's over with. My first mate and I were about to kill each other anyways. And we were just glad that we had finished it and we could move on. But it's also this sadness because you become so conditioned to being a river rat, you know, where your job is to row down a river and you're living in a tent every day and you're wearing the same clothes and you're trying to find drinking water. And then you reach the Gulf of Mexico and it's like, okay, now what am I gonna do? It's exciting, but you also know that what you just experienced will never be there again. Well, the main thing with the Mississippi, or any river expedition, or any expedition for that matter, it's an incredible metaphor of life. You have a beginning, you have a middle, and you have an end. And while you put all the emphasis on getting to the end destination, if you lived your life thinking, I want to live to 100 and then I'll be satisfied, well, you're going to miss out on everything in between. And a river expedition, even when it's raining, even when you don't want to be there, you have to realize that this is a special moment that one day won't be here. And I'm going to look back on it and I'm going to be glad I went through it. So really appreciating the moment and having an eye on the future and your next move, but also just really embracing where you are and loving life, because the only thing that's real is right now.
For all you marathon runners out there, after the break, we meet a man who ran 2+ marathons a day as he and his team set out to trek across the Andes Mountains. Marathon running is an exhausting sport, but at least once the race is over, you don't generally have to do it again the next day. That's not the case for Kevin Vallely, an architect and father of 2, who also happens to be an endurance runner and attempted to cross the Andes Mountains in South America by running an average of 2 marathons a day, every day.
I live 2 lives in a sense, and it's an interesting one. I have my main life where I design what I think are really cool contemporary homes, but I also have this sort of secret life on the side, and that's as an adventurer. I've been doing this now for the better part of 15 years, where I travel the world doing what I find very interesting, adventurous, challenging things that just inspire me and inspire others, I hope. I've hacked my way through the jungles of Borneo, actually retracing an infamous death march called the Sandakan Death March. I've been to the South Pole, I've been to the jungles of Sumatra following jungle patrollers. I've done a lot of things over the years, and I find this sort of diversity of experience really sort of compelling to me. My latest adventure was an I2P expedition, joining Race Ahab. We were attempting to run across South America, from the Pacific to the Atlantic, up and over the Andes Mountains, called Andes Run. This was really a new experience for me in a sense of we were attempting to run upwards of 70 to 100 kilometers per day, every day as we crossed the continent. I like to challenge myself, and in turn I recognize challenging myself that potentially I can be inspiring younger people to be challenged as well. I love the idea of actually trying something that there's no guarantee of success in. I was injured on day 1. Just a sharp pain and a pop in the arch of my foot, kind of that back where it inserts. And it's a classic plantar fasciitis thing. It was serious. We really thought if the next morning, if it was black and blue, I was going to go to hospital. And we thought maybe it would have been a detached arch on my foot. But my thought was that if it's not, I'm going to try to go again the next day. And I did, and it got worse, and my Achilles started to go at me. And then I said, well, clearly I'm not going to be able to do this mileage every day from this point. So I stepped out. But with every intent was trying to build back again. And interestingly, the next day after that, I ran through the Andes, 35 kilometers into the mountains, and it didn't get worse. In fact, if anything, it got a little bit better on different terrain. And it started to build from there. And I was being very careful with myself. But before long, I was running 40 plus kilometers a day, upwards to 50 and even 60 kilometers a day by the end, with the injury, getting better, amazingly. The toll of running 2+ marathons a day, it's an interesting one. You don't know what toll it takes until you try it. I suspected it was going to be a horrific toll, to be honest with you. Strangely, your body adapts, and that's the fascinating thing with all this stuff, is that you think you're going to be torn down, but in fact, in a lot of ways, you get stronger. And that's a really cool message too for someone who's tired and kids that are maybe saying, oh, I can't do this. Well, you can, you just push through it, and actually you do get stronger and you do get better. Our day-to-day routine was 5:30 a.m. we got up, had a cup of coffee, ate a bit of breakfast, and usually Ray and I were hitting the road around 7:30 in the morning. Then we would begin. And we would stop every 5 kilometers. We'd move forward, we'd stop every 5K, refuel a little bit, move on to the next 5K, another 5K, another 5K, and build that. And we were typically trying to do 50 kilometers by lunch. Take a lunch break for a couple hours, just try to, in the heat of the day, it's very, very hot in South America, and then start up again in the afternoon. The most amazing part of the journey was ascending through the Andes. And we ascended through the Chilean Andes and then dropped down through the Argentinian side. The only way through is through a tunnel between the two countries. There's a tunnel that is about 5 kilometers long, there's a car tunnel, and beside it there's an old rail tunnel. And the rail tunnel has been closed for years, but the Chilean, Argentinian police authorities up there agreed to open it up for us, and we ran through it.
So cool. This is cool.
And what an amazing experience. We're going through literally the bowels of the earth with mile high of stone above you through this tiny tunnel as we made our way through the Andes. It was really quite a cool experience. It was a tough go on the roads out there. There is lots of truck traffic. This is the road that connects to Buenos Aires, and there are thousands of trucks. And Ray and I estimated that we were passed by 3,000 trucks a day. And most of them were great. There wasn't a lot of room in these roads, but we had a bit of a shoulder and we were able to deal with that for the bulk of it. But these trucks are coming through fast and they're tired and you never know what's going to happen. Biggest fear for us in the end of the expedition, as the roads narrowed, vehicles from behind. And we had no sense of it. And they're passing from behind and they can clip you and take you out. It became too dangerous, quite simply, with that traffic. We were probably 5 days out of Buenos Aires in terms of our timing. I woke up all confused at about 4 a.m. in the morning with the tent in my face and not understanding what was going on. And we were being hit by a huge storm. And it just didn't let up. It went on for hours and hours and hours and hours and would continue actually through that day. And we were confronted at a moment at this point in our expedition that we had to follow an old dirt track into Buenos Aires. It was the only safe way in. The main road itself now had gone from being a 4-lane highway with shoulders, which we were using, to a narrow 2-lane road with no shoulder at all, just rutted ditch on the side. With the traffic and that volume, you'd be killed. Like, there was absolutely no way to run on this road. So we had to get onto this dirt track. Well, this storm completely flooded the dirt track. It was underwater, and it was underwater for the whole time.
So this is pretty much, was the only trail on the side of the road yesterday on the highway where the trucks are screaming by like a couple of feet away. Since last night's storm, this is sort of where we're at.
And they said, yeah, we need about 10 sunny days for this to clear out. And realistically looking at upwards of a month, waiting there for a month in order to continue the expedition. Getting to Buenos Aires was a wonderful feeling, and it was a great satisfaction knowing that, wow, we just crossed the continent, and we did an amazing effort in doing so. And Ray was super stoked. I mean, he'd done some amazing mileages out there, and he was very happy with the decision too. I was super stoked because I managed to claw myself back from something that I thought was going to be sort of an expedition-ending injury. One thing I really learned from this, and I definitely did learn something, was that you don't give up. And I guess I've always felt that in terms of being strong and feeling good, I don't give up. But this one, I was injured, and it was a point when you could really understand giving up. And I recognize the importance of team, and it goes beyond yourself. A lot of people are watching what you're doing and recognizing that your actions really can influence others in terms of them potentially quitting what they're doing, or maybe saying, you know, wow, look what happened, look what he did. Maybe I can continue on as well. You're living life to the fullest, and you're doing the things you really want to do, and you're living your dreams. And we all should do that. you know, and in a way, we all should be adventurers of spirit anyway, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean climbing Mount Everest. I mean, it could be your own personal adventure. It could be with your job, it could be with your kids, it could be anything, but it's pushing your own limits and, you know, finding your own challenges and not being scared to go after them.
Coming up after the break, the ultimate endurance challenge, combined with Mother Nature's harshest elements, the Iditarod. Endurance challenges test your mental, physical, and emotional limits. And if you add in Mother Nature's wrath with bitter cold temperatures, you've got a recipe for a truly difficult race. Next on Big Life, meet Hank de Bruin, a lifelong dog musher and explorer with a dream of taking his team through what can arguably be called one of the toughest races on Earth, the Iditarod.
I'm a musher. We run long distance races. 12 years ago, Tanya, my wife, and I moved up from Guelph to Haliburton County and started Winter Dance dog sled tours. We now have 150 dogs in our kennel, and we take, on average, 3,000 to 4,000 people a year out dog sledding and have a blast doing it. When we first got married, we bought one dog, a small husky pup, and then we bought a second one to play with it, and then we got third to get a small team together. Fourth to make the team a little faster, 5 and 6 to make a faster team, and 7 and 8 was, let's get rolling, yeah. And we ran sprints at first, and then from there we went into long distance. We started 5 years ago with 200 to 400 mile runs, and last year we jumped up to Iditarod, and then this year we've just come back from finishing the Yukon Quest, which are both 1,000-mile races. The Yukon Quest is an endurance race. Basically, survive first, race second. It starts in Whitehorse on even years, runs to Fairbanks, Alaska, and on odd years it switches around, runs from Fairbanks, Alaska to Whitehorse in the Yukon. The first 2 days are the toughest for me on a long race. For me, it takes 2 days for my body to acclimatize to that kind of cold. Do I feel isolated, lonely out there? No, not at all. Not at all. I'm right at home. I love it out there. There's no difference between day and night. You run day and night. So if you run 6 hours, you rest 6 hours. I prefer to run at night. I got a headlamp that focuses just down the trail, and I find myself I get myself more focused into the race running at night. So in the daytime, I find myself checking out the scenery a little too much sometimes. This year we ran in a couple good blizzards. There's one particular blizzard where you could hardly see your back dogs. Totally put faith in your dogs to pull you through. You only have so much food on your sled, so you can't just set up camp and wait the blizzard out. You gotta keep pushing. We climbed 4 mountain ranges. Eagle Summit, the last 2 miles of it, I climbed with the team tied to my waist and basically crawled up it on hands and knees to get to the summit. The way to deal with it, you never look at the overall picture. You just look at each milestone as it comes at you. As soon as you look at the overall picture, it's just too daunting. As soon as you learn to totally put your trust in the dogs will get you where you need to go. They're the heroes of the whole thing. It's the dogs. They're incredible athletes, incredible creatures, and the drive of some of the leaders is just unbelievable. They just want to please you so much, and their heart to go is incredible. It took me 13 days and 10 hours to complete the 1,000-mile race. You're so sleep deprived by the time you hit the finish line. For me, it wasn't until the next day, till I got 12 hours sleep, that all of a sudden, wow, we just finished it. When I got into the finish point, I just wanted to see my family. We've never won any of these big races. Our goal now is to start improving our times. We're hoping to go back to Iditarod next year and do it in 11 or 12 days. So basically now it's time to start improving on faster teams, just improving your whole race strategy. I've learned no matter what, it's your mindset that gets you through it. Don't ever tell me it can't be done. I'll go out and show you it can be done. My dogs are my kids, my best friends. To raise a dog from a small puppy, once it's 3-4 head into your main team, that's what's amazing. It's just see the personalities of the dogs. They're like people, they have personalities, they have wants, they have needs. What I love about dog sledding is just the solitude of the wilderness. Just to watch these amazing athletes work, that's what's so cool about it.
Would you ever run across South America?
I was injured on day 1.
Climb the 7 summits?
The whole curtain of rock basically started coming down the mountain.
Trek across Antarctica?
Unbelievable experience, pushing to the absolute limit. I'm at my limit right now.
Or row across the Atlantic Ocean?
We were hit by 2 hurricanes,
2 hurricanes
and 3 tropical storms.
Big Life is about exploring unique and untouched landscapes, pushing your physical boundaries and testing the limits of danger. Find out what it takes to be an adventure seeker, risk taker, and a high achiever only on Big Life. There are many different types of explorers. Some are in it for the adventure and the thrill of the experience. For others, it's to conduct valuable scientific research in uncharted territories. Then, there are the cultural explorers. People who not only travel to distant lands, but immerse themselves in the experience and a new way of life. Next on Big Life, meet some cultural explorers who've taken the road less traveled and gained some new perspectives on the world around them. Ryan and Colin Pyle are brothers on a journey around the perimeter of China, attempting to cross through many of China's most forbidden areas.
My name is Colin Pyle and I'm 29 years old. I'm from Toronto. I went right from university into a finance background, doing currency trading, and found that a little bit boring, so I up and left and decided to ride a motorcycle around China. My brother and I decided the journey that we wanted to partake was to circumnavigate China. My brother has been in China for 10 years and seen most of what it has to offer, and he wanted to show me what China was really about. In the West, you really only see the busy cities and the chaos, but China has so much more to offer. I had a lot of fears. I'd never been outside of Canada for that long, let alone in China, on a motorcycle, on the world's most dangerous roads. To be honest, I wasn't a very experienced motorcycle rider before this trip, so that was a huge fear. Whether I could actually do it without killing myself was a big fear. It was a great adventure for me. The experience started day 1. Leaving Shanghai, it got up to 42 degrees, humidity, riding through crazy dust and traffic. We had a lot of problems. Most days we had something go wrong. China is just so unpredictable. You just never know what you're going to run into. The biggest problem on the whole trip was dealing with the military and the police. They just didn't want us traveling around free, taking pictures and video of things all over. A lot of places we weren't allowed to go, or a lot of places we were worried about the consequences of actually being where we were. I probably felt a little bit more at times that my life was in danger. My brother being in China and being comfortable with how the military and police treat you, I think was a little bit more able to predict the outcomes better than I was. There was a road in Mongolia, on the border of China and Mongolia, that was closed off to foreigners that we decided to go on anyways. And we disobeyed the military and continued to go on that road. Being stopped sort of 50 kilometers down the road was an interesting experience, because all the military there and the police are fully loaded with lots of guns and machinery, and often their finger on the trigger. My brother said, "Leave your helmet on, let me take care of it." So that was kind of the philosophy for the most of the trip, was my brother knows how to deal with these people, he's used to it, and I should just sort of keep quiet until asked. The terrain in China is vastly diverse. The deserts are fascinating to me. We came across giant sand dunes in the middle of western China that I had no idea existed. The mountains in western Tibet and in Tibet is just amazing. Riding up to Everest was one of the highlights of the trip by far. Everest Base Camp is just, it's a magical place, because not only did we get there, but we also had to backtrack to get there, because my brother's burnt out his clutch in western Tibet and we had to fix that in Lhasa. And we actually backtracked to Everest because we both said there's no way we're coming all this way and not going to Everest Base Camp. You know, waking up in the morning and looking out at Everest is a special feeling that I'll never forget. Well, my brother and I are both very sort of driven people. We set out a goal to circumnavigate China. Very few people thought we could actually do it, and we didn't want to let anybody down. We didn't want to admit that it wasn't possible. It was absolutely more of an endurance test as opposed to a motorcycle test. I've never felt so isolated in my entire life. Some of the places we went in Western China, there's nothing around you for hundreds of kilometers. That kind of isolation is just something that most people would never think possible in China. Every day we had to push ourselves and push each other to keep going and to finish. The last week or so was just, it's hard to express the feelings that you had because you're so tired. You're not really taking in what China has to offer because you're just exhausted and you just want to get back home. When we finally arrived, it was somewhat surreal. We were just so exhausted and so tired. We just looked at each other and be like, I can't believe we actually did it, but we're done and I'm now going to bed. My brother Ryan and I were awarded a Guinness World Record for the longest continuous journey in one country on a motorcycle. I would love to continue to explore. Motivation is just new experiences. That's really what life is all about, I think, is just experiencing new things and seeing different places.
Coming up next, Big Life continues with a cultural explorer's Arctic quest to circle the midnight sun. The Arctic regions have enticed many explorers to their unforgiving lands, but for thousands of scattered communities around the North Pole, living at the Arctic Circle is a way of life that's remained unchanged for years. As an author and professor of anthropology, James Raffin is a cultural explorer who set out on a journey to circle the midnight sun. What he found not only cemented his love of the Arctic, but also shed some light on the plight of the people of the North.
I make my living principally as a writer. I'm a cultural geographer, and I dabble in canoes. I spend a lot of my time trying to understand the relationship between people and place, people and where they live. I'm a first-generation Canadian. Have spent my life kind of exploring this country that I kind of accidentally ended up in. I've been an adventurer or an explorer since I was probably about 6. Having spent 35 odd years hammering around in the Arctic of Canada, I thought it was time to meet the neighbors. The latest project is called Circling the Midnight Sun. As a cultural geographer, as a writer, as somebody who's lived and traveled with Northerners, I thought what I would do is bring back stories to put a human face on the Arctic. Circling the Midnight Sun as a project began about 20 months ago. The idea was to travel the Arctic Circle. In Canada, I've crossed the Arctic Circle dozens and dozens of times. I started in Canada canoeing with a group of Inuit youth from Quluktuk in Nunavut. And so for the last 2 years, it's been fabulous. Greenland, Iceland, Scandinavia, 4 trips to Russia. Half the circumpolar world is Russia. Very exciting place to be. Little communities, as I could access them, going right across Russia into Siberia, finishing up in Chukotka, which is the Russian Far East, right on the Bering Sea. And then instead of crossing, because it's very difficult to cross the border, I went back up into Alaska, which sort of finished the loop. I've had many close encounters with wildlife. In a place called Wager Bay, which is very close to the Arctic Circle, I was kayaking with some people there. In the summer, it has something like 80 bears per 1,000 kilometers of shoreline. Once the ice goes away, there are a lot of bears on the land. Now, the double kayak, I was in the single. The double kayak was way down the bay. So I was basically alone, paddling along in this folding kayak. And all of a sudden I saw this bear, big white polar bear on the shore. And all of a sudden the bear drops in the water. And I look at the top of this kayak, which is made out of neoprene, it's soft material. And I'm thinking, that's it. Start to paddle a little more quickly, the bear starts to swim, and I think he's going to swim out towards me. And so all of those things are going on in your head about how it's been a nice life. And then all of a sudden, the bear just turns and swims back to shore and gets up on shore and then just keeps walking along. And what had happened was there was a cliff on the edge of the Wager Bay, and instead of hauling his bulk up and around the cliff, he's a marine mammal after all, he just flopped into the water and swam around it and got up. And whether he knew I was there or whether he cared, didn't seem to matter. Probably the most difficult journey along the way, though, was traveling on the Oymacon Road, which is way off in the far east of Siberia. I was actually traveling to see an armament maker who in the Saha culture is the only person who's higher than the shaman. The armament maker is the keeper of the stories, a guy called Munda. And to get there was a 17-hour journey as one of 3 people in the back seat of this tiny little sport utility vehicle. The Oymacon Road was built by prisoners in the Gulag. They say it's actually built on the bodies of these people. But it's normally traveled in a winter condition, frozen. But we were there in August and the road was thawed. So what wasn't mud was talcum powder dust. The driver was a chain smoker and he loved Russian techno-punk music. I really thought I was going to go completely snaky. But it all completely went away when we arrived at this guy's house. this guy Mandar and spent the next few days making knives with him in a forge. He turned out to be a guy who interpreted his dreams with art. He could see the future. But I must say, I would probably still be there if I hadn't really sucked it up to get back in this vehicle for the 17-hour drive back. From this experience, I learned so much, and I'm actually in the process of trying to sort that out, writing this book, provisionally titled Circling the Midnight Sun. And the premise of my project is that Northerners have been dealing with change for millennia. Climate change is the most recent one. So I went to each of the locations along the Arctic Circle looking for people and the way they're responding to climate change. If you ask the Northerners whether climate change is the most important thing in their lives, they'll say no, that's happening slowly, we can deal with that. We see cultural change every day. We see our young people taking their own lives. We see our language decaying. And those kind of issues that have to do with how Northerners will participate in development decisions, and that notion of determination, self-determination, is a theme that goes right around the Arctic. There is hope, and there is hope in the most surprising places. But there's also tremendous difficulty and tremendous sadness. You can't ignore the difficulties, but what you can do is you can attend to people who are living with the difficulties and doing something about it to make it better.
Big Life continues after the break with a look at off-road racing around the world. Lawrence Hacking has had a love affair with off-road racing most of his life. Carving out a racing career that spans more than 40 years, he's been fortunate to race both motorcycles and trucks in some of the most dangerous conditions on the planet. But while off-road racing has allowed him to travel the world, his passion has always been experiencing the different cultures around him, from Africa to Mongolia and Mexico.
I am a rabid motorsports enthusiast. My whole life is surrounded by motorcycles and cars and off-road race trucks and adventure. I've been racing for a very long time. I started when I was 16 years old, so that's a long time ago. It's 40 years this year. You know, off-road racing, it's actually a kind of a lifestyle that people get into. There's a kind of a small community around the world that do this kind of off-road competition. Off-road is not structured, and a certain type of person is attracted to that type of situation. Kind of a sense of affronting the elements and taking on the challenge head-on and accepting responsibilities for your own actions. The very first rally I did was actually the granddaddy of all rallies, the Dakar in 2001. The Dakar Rally, for a person like me, it's a pinnacle. It's like climbing Mount Everest. One of the largest and most watched motorsports events in the world. So I hit the very last classic Paris to Dakar. It's never happened since then. So it was nice to do that because it really had a flavor of the original Dakars. The challenge is very, very difficult. The race itself was 21 days. It has a rest day in between, and the first 3 or 4 days were in Europe, so you spent a lot of time on paved roads. But the real action began on the 4th day in Morocco, and from there on it's camping in a tent and riding up to 500, 600 kilometers a day off-road. The Dakar has a full gamut of extreme conditions. I mean, we started in Paris, France, in basically zero 0 degrees and raining, to very, very hot conditions in Mauritania, the Sahara Desert, 40 degrees, somewhere like that. And everything in between, sandstorms and long distances, and of course falls, and dealing with none of the modern amenities that we enjoy here in Canada. It's not easy. There's a reason why it's considered the world's toughest motorsports event. I was fortunate enough to be the first Canadian to finish the Dakar Rally. I actually went back in 2010 to South America in an off-road race truck. No Canadian has it finished on 4 wheels. So it would be really nice to become the first Canadian to finish on 4 wheels. So I set my sights on that. My friends and I worked very hard at putting together a pretty interesting off-road race truck. My off-road race truck is based on a Mason Motorsports Pro Runner. It's a tube chassis, purpose-built off-road truck. I mean, it's my own design as far as how it's equipped. The truck has a VW turbo diesel engine and a Toyota transmission. It has a Chevy Colorado body on it, and it's equipped according to the FIA rulebook as far as being prepared for rally goes. We put it together, and fingers crossed we'll have good luck with it. Off-road racing's taken me literally around the world, and Mongolia, to me, when I decided to go there, I didn't even really know where it was. The interesting thing about Mongolia is it's one of the most remote, untouched countries in the world. There are people, nomadic people, that live like they did literally hundreds of centuries ago. One of the most arid, driest places in the world. It also has the most extreme temperatures in the world as well. I think it goes from -40 to +40 degrees, and it's a really good way to see the country. Unless you're unbelievably well supported, you can't get to these parts of the world any other way than going in a rally. The Baja 1000 has been going on for more than 40 years. It started back in '67. And it takes place in Baja, Mexico, which is a really interesting spot. Not only does it lend itself very nicely to that type of race, which is a start-finish non-stop race. It's usually 1,000 miles. And for the desert racing community in southwestern states, it's the pinnacle for them. I've been down to Baja quite a few times. It's more of a team effort. We have up to 24 people supporting it. Because it's non-stop, you have to go from pit stop to pit stop, and you always have to have a crew there. So being a crew member is almost as challenging as being a driver or co-driver. Baja is really the Wild West. Just exciting parts of flying through the desert at 85 miles an hour, hitting huge bumps, flying through the air, sand and dirt and dust coming through the windshield. Motorcycling, you can hurt yourself, and you have to realize that every time I let the clutch out, I remind myself that this is a dangerous thing that I'm going to be getting into, and you have to ride accordingly. The speeds are very, very high, and a lot of things get broken, and a lot of crashes occur and things like that. All sorts of mayhem occurs. That's what off-road racing's all about. The sensation of riding or driving is unbelievable. I mean, very little compares to flying across, the desert in an off-road race truck, V8, 500 horsepower race truck. I mean, that is a sensation that's really a rush of adrenaline. It's a little bit like a drug. I'm so thankful and appreciative of my incredible opportunities that I've been given and had to experience life and have a really interesting life.
Would you ever run across South America?
I was injured on day one.
Climb the 7 summits.
The whole curtain of rock basically started coming down the mountain.
Trek across Antarctica.
Unbelievable experience, pushing to the absolute limit. I'm at my limit right now.
Or row across the Atlantic Ocean.
We were hit by 2 hurricanes, and 3 tropical storms.
Big Life is about exploring unique and untouched landscapes, pushing your physical boundaries and testing the limits of danger. Find out what it takes to be an adventure seeker, risk taker, and a high achiever only on Big Life. Inspired by books at a young age, Colin Angus was always drawn to seek out extraordinary adventures like the ones he read about in his youth. He started exploring in his early 20s with a variety of adventures, from paddling the mighty Amazon River to getting lost in Mongolia. But it wasn't until years later that he took up his greatest adventure, to try to circumnavigate the globe using only human power. To add to the high stakes, Colin asked his future wife to join him in this phenomenal attempt to row across the Atlantic Ocean in what can only be called the ultimate relationship test.
My name's Colin Angus, and this is my wife Julie, and we're expeditioners. We've done quite a few different adventures, including rowing across the Atlantic Ocean in a rowboat. The idea of going around the world entirely by human power was a concept that intrigued me for years, and I think it just seems sort of magical, the idea of heading west and using nothing but your own arms and legs and going west, west, west until you're home again. Very simple in concept, but at the same time in execution, very complex, very difficult. I just loved the idea that nobody had done it before, nobody had gone around the world entirely by human power, and it promised to be a great way to explore some of these remote areas that you'd never otherwise visit.
I think there's a few things that drew me to this expedition. Part of it is I wanted to undertake a big adventure. I really wanted to push myself and see what I could achieve for my own interest and curiosity. Another part was an interest in the ocean. My background is in science, and I've always been fascinated with the ocean environment.
Oh, look at you, Rara. Oh, you like that, don't you?
The expedition took 2 years in total. That was starting from Vancouver, ending in Vancouver. And the longest leg, continuous leg that was the same thing, was crossing the Atlantic Ocean, which took 5 months, just Julie and myself in the rowboat. So 5 months without support. It was 5 different modes of human-powered transportation: canoeing, rowing, skiing, cycling, of course. It's 43,000 kilometers in total around the world. And the number of chocolate bars eaten were, I think, is about 2,000 chocolate bars eaten en route. So you need something to fuel you, and chocolate bars taste good as well. Starting out in the expedition, I was with a friend. His name was Tim Harvey, and unfortunately, things just didn't work out. And in Siberia, we ended up traveling separately. And at that point, I was alone for almost 4 months, and fortunately, Julie, my wife, was able to join me in Moscow. From North America, we crossed the Bering Sea, which is about a 400-kilometer stretch of ocean, so that was quite difficult. We were blown north and then south and ended up doing almost 1,000 kilometers to do a 400-kilometer crossing. And then once we got into Siberia, that was even tougher just because of the extreme temperatures we're dealing with. It's actually the coldest inhabited region in the planet. Today
Today is a freezing, typical day in Chukotka. It seems to snow and blizzard all the time with minus 35, minus 40-degree temperatures. It's chilly, it's freezing, and this is our home now. This is where we live.
One of the towns we were going through, its average temperature is minus 57 degrees, which is just freezing. That's in January. So we had to prepare for those kinds of conditions. We had a lot of clothing, heavy-duty tents, and it took 5 months to get through that roadless wilderness in eastern Siberia. And then once we reached the roads, things started getting a little easier. Still very cold temperatures, but much easier to make forward progress. And then spring started arriving, so it made a huge difference just having that sunshine and warmer temperatures. Going through Siberia and Russia, it's just a huge, expansive country. It's 9 time zones from the eastern side to the western side, which just gives you an idea of the scope of the country. And it took a year just to get through Russia. And things were going quite a bit faster when I met up with Julie. It was now summertime, and we had paved roads to cycle on, but there's no getting away from the fact that it's a lot of work just to continue making distance.
I'd been involved with Colin's expedition right from the beginning. We decided to join forces and cross the ocean together, and I also would join Colin for another 15,000 kilometers of cycling in addition to the ocean crossing. When we arrived in Lisbon, we purchased a rowboat that we bought off the internet. It was a second-hand boat, so we had a lot of work to do to get it ready for the ocean. Finally, we got the boat prepared, and then we had to fill it with everything we needed for the ocean crossing. So that's 5 months of food, and because, of course, we're exerting so much energy, it's burning twice as many calories as we normally would. And we just went to the grocery store and went shopping there and just got dried goods and made do with what we could find. And we didn't have a support boat, so if we just forgot something, we'd have to go without. So it was really important to be properly prepared. I had never really rowed before, so I had a lot of fears when we started this journey. The biggest worry was the Atlantic Ocean. It's a huge crossing. It would be the first time a woman had crossed the Atlantic from mainland to mainland. It's almost 10,000 kilometers. When we left Lisbon in our rowboat, it felt exhilarating and exciting. At the same time, it felt terrifying. When we left the shelter of land and the huge swell of the ocean raised and lower our boat, you feel the immensity of what you're going into. And that first night when the lights of Lisbon faded away and you knew that's it, that's your last touch of land, and you'd be out there until you reached the other side of the ocean and made landfall. That was pretty intimidating. My biggest worry was the weather. We timed it so that we would avoid the stormy season and the hurricanes, but there's always a possibility of anomalies, and unfortunately that's exactly what happened. The year that we crossed the Atlantic Ocean was the worst hurricane season in history. It was 2005, 2006, and there were a lot of unusual storms. We were hit by, was it 2 hurricanes?
2 hurricanes,
and 3 tropical storms. And both hurricanes were anomalies. The first one, Hurricane Vince, was in a part of the ocean that had never before seen a hurricane. And the second one, Hurricane Epsilon, was after hurricane season was supposed to be over. Hurricane Vince came right over us. The eye of the hurricane was 90 miles away from us, so that means we were really in the thick of the storm. And at the worst of it, we were in waves that were about 50 feet high with wind speeds that were well over 100 kilometers an hour. There's not really much you can do in a rowboat. You can't row in waves that big, so what we did is we secured everything on the boat and we went inside the cabin and we rode the storm out.
To protect our heads, we've actually fastened helmets, which we've made from pantyhose, and we've stuffed the interior with clothing. And so if we do end up banging our heads against the wall, it will actually protect us somewhat, much better than not having anything at all.
We spent 3.5 days inside our cabin just being shaken about like that, and then eventually the hurricane passed over us and the weather started to calm and we were able to get back out on deck.
It can be pretty monotonous out in the high seas. You're doing a lot of rowing. You get up in the morning and we're taking shifts all the time, so one person's on the oars, one is inside eating, sleeping, whatever, and we're doing about 10 to 12 hours each behind the oars. But you become more relaxed as the weeks wear on. You start realizing that, this boat is seaworthy, and your mind just sort of accepts this new world that you're now living in.
You kind of run out of stories to tell in the first couple weeks, but thankfully we did have a stereo system and an iPod, which was very nice.
2 days into the trip, we were almost hit by a freighter. It would have been a direct collision course. I'm sure many people have seen that poster where there's dolphins leaping out of the bow wave on a freighter. Well, we saw that same scene, but without the dolphins, just a big wave and this wall of steel behind it. And it was actually the wave off the front of the freighter that pushed us to the side, and we missed the freighter by about a foot.
That was like a foot away from us. I opened the door and I looked inside and I saw that all I saw was the side of the freighter.
It's just so scary seeing a freighter coming at you. It's like being in a car accident, seeing a big semi coming straight at you. We just thought we were going to be splintered when that freighter was coming at us, but thankfully the bow wave pushed us to the side.
We were on the boat for 5 months in total. It was 4 months non-stop from Portugal to St. Lucia, and then another month from St. Lucia to Costa Rica.
Land ho! The feeling of seeing land after being out at sea for so long, and it's almost indescribable, just because out there, like I said, it was very nerve-wracking at first. You're terrified and worried about the storms, and finally you live through all that, but you're still dreaming about land. One day you're going to get back again. You're going to be able to have fresh fruits and vegetables. You're going to be able to have an icy cold drink. We don't have refrigeration. It's so warm. And you really start to miss it, miss people. And when we finally reached land, it was everything we imagined.
Finally, we see land. We're not at the end yet, but we're at the Caribbean.
We've made it. We've made it to land.
We're there!
Oh, thank you.
We couldn't walk. That was the only problem.
Yeah, you can't walk after you've been in the boat for that long. You literally can barely walk.
Oh my God. Oh, it's not easy. It feels like everything's moving.
I'm extremely proud of Julie. I knew beforehand that she'd have what it took to complete an expedition like this. It's not about being built like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's about being able to push forward when you have an idea and keep at it. And Julie, of all the people I know, is probably the most determined.
Now you can see why I married him. As for Colin, I'm always proud of him, and he's everything I thought he would be. He's been an adventurer pretty much his whole life since he started sailing at the age of 19, and he ran the Amazon River, and then he was the first to run the Yenisei. So I've always known that he's very successful at going out and completing the expeditions that he wants to do. Well, I think it definitely made our relationship that much stronger. When we went on this trip, we were engaged, and I guess you could say it was the ultimate litmus test. I mean, either things were going to go well or they were going to fall apart. And so we got married, and so obviously they went quite well.
There's only one last thing to do.
Big Life continues after the break with a look at a young globetrotter and a world record holder. Next on Big Life, meet a young globetrotter who grew up around the water in sailboats all of his life. By the time Zach Sunderland was a teen, he was ready for his next big adventure, attempting to sail around the world solo while also seeking to become the youngest person to achieve that lofty goal.
I was the first solo person under 18 to sail around the world, and I set it when I was 17 years old. It was quite a crazy adventure. It was 13 months at sea, and I got back from that last year. My whole life I've grown up around boats. When I was born in Santa Monica, I was brought down to a boat to live. I've lived on boats for 8 years. My dad's business is all into boats as well, so he taught me how to sail when I was 4 years old. I kind of grew up with it, as well as adventure and traveling. So my dad's English, and we've lived all over the world and sailed and adventured all over the world as well. So when I grew up, I wanted to pursue that, and I love adventuring, and I tried to put this project together to be the youngest person to sail around the world. And kind of the more people that told me I couldn't do it, the more I wanted to pursue it, and made it happen. And when I was 16, I set off and set the record. I really love the feeling of freedom I get from sailing. It's kind of just like, there's no other feeling like that. The adventure and going to places in the world that you really can't get to unless you spend like 30 days at sea. It's an amazing feeling, and it's kind of like a sense of achievement once you get there, and there's no other way you can feel that apart from doing these long passages. The first passage I did, going over to Hawaii, it was a 21-day passage, leaving from Marina del Rey, sailing to Hawaii. And when I first saw the mountains of Kauai was the island I first came up to, and it was just these big green cliffs just coming out of the clouds. And it was like the best feeling in the world, just seeing that after 20 days at sea. Just how awesome, you know, just to get to this destination that I've been trying to get to for 21 days. So that was probably one of the better feelings. I really remember that one. But I really met some amazing people along the way and saw some amazing different things. There really was no average day sailing out there, just because some days I'd be up all night and sleeping all day, and some days there'd be ships in the middle of the night, or squalls or storms. It just varied so much. You know, it was just day to day, taking it as it came, trying to get sleep when I could, doing a little school, studying the charts for the next place I was going to, learning some language of the next place I was going to. The ocean doesn't really scare me. I've got a lot of respect for it. When stuff starts breaking on my boat, or there's like an outside thing like pirates coming down, that's when the times get pretty scary.
I'm being rapidly approached by pirates. Any vessel within range, please respond.
Yeah, they were terrifying, but you know, got through it, and I think I learned some from it and kind of grew as a person. As I was coming back up the coast of South America and back into the Americas and everything, I was very ready to be home, because the last leg of the trip was all slamming into the wind, and as soon as I got back into the Mexican waters where I'd sailed, you know, hundreds of times before, it was just like a great kind of sense of, wow, I actually did this. It was kind of realizing it. As soon as I got back home, it was a crazy, crazy day. It was a bunch of helicopters, and a bunch of my friends came out, and it was a really awesome day, and I was just kind of didn't know what to do with myself after that. I mean, every day for over a year, I'd woken up with like some huge goal in front of me, just like something I just had to wake up, and there was my mountain to climb for the day. The next adventure, I'm looking into doing the Northwest Passage. It's above Canada and Alaska, and it's this ice pass up there, and I'm in the process right now of planning that all out. I put my boat I did my last trip on the market, Intrepid, so I'm gonna sell that boat and get a big steel boat, hopefully go through the Northwest Passage. I try and show people how dreams aren't just dreams. You have to make them reality, you know, to take them out of that realm. And I show people how me, by just stubbornness and kind of just pushing through, made mine happen. And everyone's got a dream out there, so I try and encourage people to get out there and live life to the max and every day.
Would you ever run across South America?
I was injured on day one.
climb the 7 summits.
The whole curtain of rock faces are coming down the mountain.
Trek across Antarctica.
Unbelievable experience, pushing to the absolute limit. I'm at my limit right now.
Or row across the Atlantic Ocean.
We were hit by 2 hurricanes, and 3 tropical storms.
Big Life is about exploring unique and untouched landscapes, pushing your physical boundaries and testing the limits of danger. Find out what it takes to be an adventure seeker, risk taker, and a high achiever only on Big Life. There are many famous explorers who have braved the high altitudes of the most dangerous peaks. Whether it's just a leisurely hobby or a passion for testing their limits, mountain climbers in particular face many difficult challenges in their quest to literally reach the top of the world. Megan McGrath has first-hand experience with the life and death situations involved in mountain climbing since attempting to reach the 7 summits and her final challenge, conquering Mount Everest.
My name is Megan McGrath. I'm a major in the Canadian Forces. I'm an aerospace engineer. Oh, I've completed a number of adventures. I've completed a mountaineering challenge called the 7 Summits. There's 2 versions of that, and I've completed both of those. I wasn't doing it to achieve a specific objective, but it turns out when I was looking through a website with all the statistics that I became the first Canadian woman to achieve both versions of the 7 Summits. I've participated in the Marathon des Sables. I've skied to the North Pole. I've skied to the South Pole. And I've climbed on a number of 8,000-meter peaks. When it comes to the 7 Summit Mountaineering Challenge, for lack of a better way of putting it, there are 7 mountains in each version. I've climbed Mount McKinley in North America. It's also known as Denali. In South America, I've climbed Aconcagua. In Europe, I've climbed Russia's Mount Elbrus, it's called. In Africa, I've climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. In Antarctica, I've climbed Vinson. In Asia, I've climbed Mount Everest. And in Australia, Kosciuszko. Now, as I mentioned before, there's 2 versions of the 7 summits. So I've also climbed Karsten's Pyramid in Indonesia. The decision to climb the 7 summits was never really a decision. I started my first job in the Canadian Forces in Ottawa, and that began in about 2001. And my boss reminded me that I had to use my vacation time, we call it leave, and I had no idea where to go. So I went to the travel agent and we were discussing what my interests were, and I've always wanted to climb mountains. With this in mind, I booked a trip for Kilimanjaro, and it was a horrible experience the first time I went. I didn't know anything about altitude. I screwed up my water system, and by the time I got to the top, I mean, my stomach was empty, my bowels were empty. My head was pounding insanely. It hurt a lot. So I really messed it up. But I also remember being on top going, I really want to figure this out, how to do this well, and I want to go higher and really get my game together. And from there, it was just, I went to these mountains that happened to be mountains in the 7 Summit Challenge just because it lined up with my leave time in the military. And before I knew it, I had only 1 or 2 left, including Mount Everest in Asia. I climbed Mount Everest in 2007, and I mean, it's a mountain that you read tons of books on. They make movies about it. It's this legendary mountain, and when I went, I was so happy to be there. I mean, it's still to this day the best climb that I remember. It had every experience that you kind of would think that you would have on a mountain. We had great team camaraderie. It was my first experience working with Sherpa people, learning who they are and learning that they're our partners on the mountain. They're also our experts on the mountains. And we had a really wonderful Serdar, our base camp manager in this case, Pratemba. He is a legend on the mountains. He's climbed with the best climbers, historical climbers. So his advice was definitely worth taking. Going through the mountains, two climbers had an accident and unfortunately didn't make it, and Sherpa folks were bringing down the bodies. And I'd never seen a dead body, but in mountaineering it's something that you may expect. And I saw them that they were on the other side and they were going to be shuttling these two sleds, which were the two bodies of these Korean folks. And that was part of the experience as well. I just helped them on the other side of the crevasse, pulling them up, and it just slides in front of you and you're like, I mean, this could really be you, and maybe not this climb, but another climb. So it kind of hits home that we may not always come home from climbing, so it's kind of something we always have to keep in the back of our mind. It had happiness, achieving the summit, a beautiful morning, really successful climb, felt really strong throughout the climb. It was gorgeous, but then we had to come down the mountain, and on the way down there was a particular incident with a climber, and happened to be there and decided to take forward action and help out this particular climber. I was doing my best to keep this climber warm, oxygenated, that sort of thing, but frankly it wasn't looking good. I saw a climber and another Sherpa coming down the mountain, so I kind of sat down beside the climber who was ill and kind of make it obvious that, okay, something weird is going on here. And this climber, it was a Western climber, and he sat right in front of me and stopped. And he says, oh, what's going on, basically. And I described to him all the steps that had taken place, but very methodically. And he goes, well, I'm Dave Hahn, and I'm with IMG. And I was over the moon. Dave Hahn is a superb climber, one of the best, and he's been involved in numerous rescues on Mount Everest in particular. And I knew this girl wasn't necessarily going to be safe, but she had a chance. It was with Dave Hahn. I'm really grateful that he was able to stop by. This particular climber lived to summit a year later. Some of the challenges I encountered while climbing were the obvious things. AMS, being able to prevent altitude mountain sickness, how to pack your gear efficiently, you know, just kind of things that come with practice that you kind of learn to deal with as you go along. For a woman peeing on the side of a mountain, that can be, you know, you gotta learn the technique to do that. So that's one of the challenges I encountered. But of course, there's more serious challenges that you have to deal with. The weather, you have to contend with poor weather conditions and know how to deal with it when it's snowing feet at a time, and what you need to do to either maintain your camp, or if you're out on the route at that time, you need to be able to have the knowledge to make the right decision whether you carry on or turn around. Although the most difficult mountain for me during the 7 Summit series was Mount McKinley, I have climbed a more difficult mountain. I've climbed on the mountain. I never got to the top. That mountain is K2. It's the second highest mountain in the world. It's in Pakistan, and it's quite a dangerous and deadly mountain. There's many dangerous factors of the mountain, and one in particular is a significant rock and ice fall. Although you sit at home, you have lofty dreams of succeeding in terms of summiting the mountain, when you're standing at the base of K2, you certainly get a different perspective. So I readjusted my goals. There was a certain camp that I wanted to achieve on the mountain, Camp 4. I was with a partner who was actually climbing with some other people, and we traveled to start off together, but with different speeds and everything, you might end up alone at certain sections and everything. It was getting later in the season, and the rockfall was becoming very significant. I was now making my way down the mountain. I was going from Camp 2, and I was going to make my way to base camp. I departed early in the morning because it's colder earlier in the morning, and it kind of stabilizes the rock. As I was proceeding down the mountain, I somehow managed through a gully. If you slipped and fell without protection, you'd fall a long way. And as I was clipping into the ropes properly to kind of just get some more energy, I'd burned a lot coming through that gully, I heard the telltale signs of rocks, which is the zing and the swoosh of the rocks flying by. And I looked over, and sure enough, I saw rocks bouncing down the rock. And I just went, oh shit. The whole curtain of rock basically started coming down the mountain. And for whatever reason, I wanted to just make sure there was nowhere to go, because it'd be silly to stand in the curtain of rock if there's an escape route. And just as I kind of peeked up just a little bit, I saw a rock, literally the size of a football, coming straight for me. I went, oh shit. So I was safely secured to the rock because I wanted to ensure that if something happened and I was knocked unconscious, I'd be just dangling off of that anchor point. So I skirted out of the way of that one, and I tucked my pack as close as I could over my back. I was making sure my helmet was all properly aligned. I had a brim of my baseball cap underneath, and just as I was adjusting, more rocks came right on top of me. After a few moments, it stopped and peaked up, and the coast seemed clear for a little bit. And then of course you go down the mountain as fast as you can, but then I still wasn't even in the rock danger zone at that point. That was supposed to be a not too bad area. So you keep going, and you just pray you don't get hit by rocks pretty much, and you make your way through those areas as quickly and safely as possible. These expeditions test both your physical and your mental strength. And to be honest, that's what I love about it. I find that really fun. I love to challenge myself, finding out what makes you either break down and want to quit or get really tired physically. I love that mental push. I love that you don't have to be there, but I choose to be there, and I choose to make the right decisions, assessing everything. It is so fun. It is awesome.
Big Life continues after the break with an ultimate adventurer, mountain climber, polar explorer, and endurance runner, Lori Dexter. Some people are born with an innate desire for adventure and exploring. From a young age growing up in the Scottish countryside, Lori Dexter has been interested in exploring places that are hard to reach.
My name is Lori Dexter, and at the present time I work primarily as an expedition leader, which means that I take people on very small ships to the most remote places in the world, and it's just an extension of my lifestyle, which has always been an adventure type lifestyle. I happened to live in North Baffin Island at a time when it was relatively unexplored, and started to ascend some of the mountains. They were not particularly difficult, but they had not been climbed before. Some of the most memorable trips I've taken have been such as the Polar Bridge expedition, where we skied from Russia to Canada through the North Pole, taking 91 days. Skiing across Bylot Island, a completely self-sufficient expedition, sled hauling for 44 days. Skiing across Baffin Island, magnificent scenery. Skiing to the South Pole as well. Also, of course, not just the expeditions, but running. My most memorable race, I think, is the Comrades. It's a 90-kilometre race in South Africa, which I've done twice. 24-hour races, I've done a number of those, as far apart as Halifax to San Francisco. But the thing that started it all, for me, in terms of running, was the Midnight Sun Marathon run up at Nanisivik, between Nanisivik and Arctic Bay in the high Arctic of Canada. I've done about 10 of these 24-hour races, where you start at 8 o'clock in the morning and you finish 8 o'clock the next morning, and whoever's gone furthest is the winner. There's no set distance, just who can go furthest in a set time. From then on, I just realized that I was actually better equipped to longer distances. I didn't have the genetic ability to be a highly competitive marathon runner, but over the longer distances I found that I could maintain pretty much the same pace and just go on for hour after hour. So I just had that endurance and loved it. The expedition which created the most media attention was the Polar Bridge expedition. And this is where we skied from Russia to Canada. It included a number of very well-known names. Dmitry Shparo was the leader of the expedition. Misha Malakhov was the Russian doctor. Richard Weber was one of the other Canadians. So I feel highly privileged to travel. I've traveled with some of the best polar explorers of the present time. But it was a tough expedition because you're traveling over a thin surface, the polar ocean, which is frozen, always breaking up, moving under the action of wind and ocean currents. Traveling in extreme cold is unbelievable. The temperatures for the first month or so were steadily between -40 and -50, and it just saps the energy out of you. I remember one night in the tent, we'd had a long hard day, it was very cold, and I couldn't get to sleep because my sleeping bag, just like everybody else's sleeping bag, had lots of ice that had built up in it through moisture. The bag had lost a lot of its insulation, and I was just shivering and shivering. I couldn't get to sleep, and it's scary because all sorts of nightmares go through your head when you're shivering like that. And I slept beside the Russian radio operator because I was the English-speaking radio operator, and he was the biggest man on the team. And in the middle of the night, he obviously was having problems getting to sleep as well. And I hear this voice say, "Come closer." So I did, and we both went to sleep. In addition to those physical expeditions, I work as an expedition leader, taking people to remote places in very small ships, mainly the polar regions. I've done somewhere between 110 and 120 expeditions to Antarctica, and I've done over 100 ship-based expeditions in the Arctic as well. Everything from the Canadian Arctic to the Russian Arctic to Baffin Island, Greenland, Iceland, you name it. And I've had, of course, the motivation to want to do that because, let's face it, not everybody wants to, excuse the language, freeze their ass off. And one of the most unusual trips I would do for them is on the Russian nuclear icebreakers. These are the only ships that can go independently right to the North Pole itself. I've done 16 trips on them. Used to be on a ship called the Yamal. They've now got a new ship which is called the 50 Years of Victory. It's the biggest, most powerful icebreaker in the world. It's just an enormous chunk of steel that powers its way, smashing and grinding its way right to the very North Pole itself. To give you an idea when I talk about power, I've just finished working in Antarctica on a small ship called the Ocean Nova, which is 2,000 horsepower. The biggest icebreaker that Canada has is somewhere around 25,000 horsepower. The nuclear icebreaker is 75,000 horsepower. We will smash our way for about 4 or 5 days through 2 meters of ice to get to the North Pole. We work on very good ships, so there's not usually a lot of real danger involved, but we do cross some of the roughest seas in the world, from the southern tip of Argentina to Antarctica, across the Drake Passage. It can be very, very violently rough at times. The thing about risk is that it has to be calculated, and when I've done my expeditions, it's always been with a lot of research. As a consequence, I haven't had a lot of those death-defying incidents that you read about in many books and with other people. Having said that, nature is unpredictable, and no matter how well you are prepared or think you are, it can take you by surprise. Having taken part in so many expeditions of a variety of nature, I've learned that you can't take anything for granted, and a lot of it is what life throws at you and also gives you the opportunities for. And I've just been very, very, very lucky to have lived in a good, healthy environment with lots of food and good friends.
Would you ever run across South America?
I was injured on day 1.
Climb the 7 summits.
The whole curtain of rock basically started coming down the mountain.
Trek across Antarctica.
Unbelievable experience, pushing to the absolute limit. I'm at my limit right now.
Or row across the Atlantic Ocean.
We were hit by 2 hurricanes, and 3 tropical storms.
Big Life is about exploring unique and untouched landscapes, pushing your physical boundaries and testing the limits of danger. Find out what it takes to be an adventure seeker, risk taker, and a high achiever only on Big Life. What ignites the drive to explore? Whether it's the thrill of the chase or a burning curiosity, adventure seeking can often become a way of life. Next on Big Life, meet a few adventurers who've turned their hobbies into their life's work. From chasing Mother Nature to exploring off the beaten track, these trailblazers are facing their fears while having the time of their lives.
My name is Brendan Schnurr. I'm 25 years old and I kiteboard in Ontario. I started kiteboarding back in 2007. I went on a trip to Dominican Republic with my sister and we took some lessons. And as soon as I got back, I bought my first setup and have been hooked ever since. Kiteboarding is a pretty new sport. It's kind of a mixture of wakeboarding and somewhat parasailing. Yeah, kiteboarding kind of started in around 2000 or maybe a couple years before, but the kites were really kind of behind their time. They were just yanking people around. You could never make it back to the same place you started. And it really became a lot safer for the general public, probably about 2005 and onwards. There's 2 different parts of kiteboarding. There's kiteboarding and there's kite surfing. Kiteboarding, you're using a twin tip board, which you can ride either direction. It's strapped to your feet and you can jump up in the air up to 30, 40 feet and do big tricks, grabs, spins, flips, everything like that. Kite surfing is the same sort of thing, same kite, you're just on a surfboard instead. And instead of looking for flat water, you're looking for big waves that you can get on and tow yourself into and surf with. When you learn how to kiteboard, it's 90% about flying the kite and about 10% of board skills. So if you do have board skills from another sport like snowboarding or wakeboarding, it helps. But it's a lot about the kite and flying it in the proper places and how to create power with the kite and how to get rid of the power when you need to. There's a lot of things you always have to consider when you're kiteboarding. We're always looking at the wind websites, which tell us if there's any fronts coming through, how strong the wind will be, what the waves will be like. We kind of have to look at a few different sources, make sure it's safe to go out, and then when everything comes together, you can have a great day. In Ontario, kiteboarding's grown quite a bit in the last 5 or so years, especially since I started. There used to only be, 5 guys on the beach when you went, and now if you go on a busy weekend day, there's 30, 40, 50 guys. So it's definitely gaining popularity. I'd say that Ontario probably has about 600-700 people who kiteboard around the Great Lakes. And the great thing about Ontario is that we have all these Great Lakes, so there's usually always somewhere to go that's windy. Some of my favorite spots for kiteboarding around Ontario are like the eastern end of Lake Erie, anywhere on Lake Ontario, up on Georgian Bay at Wasaga Beach, or anywhere on Lake Huron around Sauble Beach. Kiteboarding has introduced me to a lot of people who I wouldn't have met otherwise, and we just travel around together, chasing the strongest winds. It's definitely a lifestyle that I love. Yeah, we've had a couple close call stories kiteboarding when we see some black clouds coming for us and push it as much as we can, try to stay on the water and keep riding, and then all of a sudden the storm hits and you just need to land the kite within a few seconds or else you're going to be pulled away. So we've had some close calls that way, but most of the time it's just fun coming out to the beach on warm days, lots of wind. Kiteboarding's taken me to a lot of different cool places. I've been to Brazil, Dominican Republic, Cuba, Peru, North Carolina, British Columbia, New Brunswick. So it's taken me a lot of places that I wouldn't have gone otherwise. I'd say my favorite location so far was Peru. In Peru there's huge waves and tons of wind, and the waves are just perfect. There's definitely a lot of risk involved in kiteboarding. First of all, you're out really far in the water, and if something happens, you don't have a life jacket, you don't have anything to keep you floating, so you're on your own there. When you put the kite down, it can be challenging to relaunch it at times in the waves. You have to be careful where you go. You never really want to go out further than where you can swim. Another thing is, when you're in Ontario, the water a lot of the time is very cold, so you have to wear a really thick wetsuit. And take into consideration that at any moment your gear might fail and you might be swimming in from out far. You also have to look out for objects that you can hit. I've seen people launch kites with tangled lines and they've just gotten lofted and landed on piles of rocks. I've seen people just get dragged through the water, over beaches. I actually broke somebody's nose when I was learning how to kiteboard because I was getting dragged down the beach and somebody jumped on my back and tried to help me, and I went to pull the release and elbowed him right in the nose. So it's a dangerous sport, and you just have to be really careful with everything you do and make sure that you take lessons before you get started. The thing I love about kiteboarding is you get to explore all these crazy destinations. It's taken me all over Ontario, and it's taken me all over the world as well. And that's something that I definitely wouldn't have done if I wasn't into this sport.
From catching big air to chasing the wildest winds. Next on Big Life, a storm chaser whose passion leads him right into the eye of the storm. It's not every day that you get to witness Mother Nature's wrath up close.
Holy!
But for George Karunas, a professional storm chaser, this heart-stopping adventure is just another day at the office. It was the childhood hobby that turned into an adult obsession, and now, for Karunas, storm chasing is a way of life. Among his encounters, one of the most devastating storms of the century, Hurricane Katrina.
I'm George Karunas. I'm a professional storm chaser, adventurer, and I explore the Earth's most extreme places.
I don't think it'll be long before this whole track of road is completely underwater.
Ever since I was a kid, I always had an interest in science and nature, and then as I got older, it sort of developed further into an interest in travel, photography, adventure, exploration, and being a storm chaser has allowed me to combine all those things that I love into basically one amazing career. The number one goal when I'm chasing a storm or climbing a volcano is to not die. I want to keep doing this for many, many years, so I try to do a dangerous thing in as safe a manner as possible, as crazy as that sounds.
Here we go.
I do these things because I love nature. I'm not an adrenaline junkie. I don't jump off of cliffs. I don't throw myself out of airplanes every weekend, but I do like to see Mother Nature up close and personal when she's at her most extreme. It's not the adrenaline that gets me, it's the spectacle of nature. Storm chasing is so difficult. Endless drives, terrible food, not much scenery, but when you see a storm that's twice the size of Mount Everest, concentrating all of its energy on one point, grinding away in a farmer's field, it's just such a spectacular thing to see. It's awe-inspiring. The region of the central United States that encompasses Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and some of the Dakotas, it's Tornado Alley. That's where most of the tornadoes in the world occur. Up to 800 to 1,000 tornadoes touch down in the central US every year. Most of the time you don't hear about them because they don't hit any towns. Most of them touch down in farmers' fields, but if there's one touching down, usually I'm not too far away. A typical day of storm chasing starts with the morning forecast. We have to try and figure out where the tornadoes are going to be, if there's going to be any, sometimes hours or even days in advance. So we have to be very studied in meteorology. So we'll pull up maps, figure out the computer models, and try and decide where we have to go that day. Then we'll continue driving in that direction. Throughout the day, we'll modify our forecast, try and narrow that position down from millions of square kilometers down to a point that might be a mile wide. Once we get into position, usually the storms fire up about 5 or 6 in the afternoon. That's the witching hour. That's when we know the storms are either going to fire or not. And if they do, it's time to put the pedal to the metal and get up close.
This is really close. Oh man!
Just this past tornado season, we had this amazing encounter in South Dakota. A large tornado touched down out in an open field, just the way we like it, not affecting anyone, maybe scaring a few prairie dogs. And we watched this thing for almost an hour as it got larger, changed shape, morphed into all these different sizes. This tornado approached this small farmhouse and crossed the road just behind this farmhouse. There was this oblivious driver that was coming the other way and just missed getting creamed by this tornado. I was trying to alert him, had no idea what was going on. Either he was completely oblivious or had to change his pants shortly after. The most difficult part emotionally of storm chasing is seeing people lose everything and sometimes even lose their lives. When we're chasing a storm, if it hits a town and there's someone who needs help, that's it. We call off the chase and lend help immediately. We're all trained in first aid, and basically that becomes the priority at that moment. Tornadoes are incredibly destructive, but usually on a small scale, usually no more than a couple of kilometers wide and maybe 50 kilometers long. But when you compare that to a hurricane like Katrina, it's something completely different. Katrina was the most devastating, destructive, and frightening storm that I've ever experienced. I drove from Toronto a day and a half straight down to the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I chose not to go to New Orleans because I knew that the weak side of the storm was going to hit New Orleans and the strong side was going to hit Mississippi. If Hurricane Katrina had moved 50 miles to the west, New Orleans would have been hit 10 times harder than it was. It's hard to believe that they actually dodged a bullet when we saw the destruction afterwards. In Gulfport, Mississippi, I decided that the only safe place for me during this storm was a steel-reinforced concrete parking garage. I didn't trust any other building in the city. A group of us spent the night sitting in this parking garage, no sleep whatsoever, not knowing if we were going to survive the next 24 hours. And when dawn broke the next day, the hurricane started to come ashore. And it's a gradual process. The wind started to pick up, and then the rain picked up, and it got heavier and stronger. A few hours later, it was howling like I had never seen. And all around me, I knew that people were struggling for their lives. And it was a horrible feeling. There were pieces of metal flying around like helicopter blades. Every little piece of glass or stone felt like a bullet hitting me in the face. At times, I couldn't even stand up. I literally had to crawl across the parking garage floor to get from point A to point B. If I would have stood up, I would have been gone like a kite. After the storm passed, I was finally able to see the extent of the destruction, and I couldn't believe what I had seen. Cars, boats, buoys from the harbor strewn in the street. That just gives you an idea of how strong the wind and especially the waves were. Hurricane Katrina is something that I will never, ever forget. As a storm chaser, I've seen nature do things that most people have not. And because of that, and because of my experience, I feel that I have a respect for Mother Nature that is earned, deserved. In the grand scheme of things, we are so small, and it only takes a moment. As anyone has seen a disaster on the news, we know that life can change in an instant. Mother Nature, I don't see her as an opponent. I don't see her as a quarry, as something I'm hunting. I see it as my partner. Mother Nature is my co-pilot as I'm trying to document these different things. And we work hand in hand. And there are days when she cooperates with me, and there are days when she doesn't. And I really want to stay off of her naughty list, so to speak.
After the break on Big Life, meet an off-road racer who spent 40 years on the rubble. As a young child, Lawrence Hacking was drawn to motorsports and racing. His need for adventure evolved into an off-road racing career spanning over 40 years. His biggest challenge? Africa's treacherous terrain and the fierce competition of one of the most dangerous races on Earth, the Dakar Rally. That race is a fight to the finish.
My name is Lawrence Hacking, and I am a rabid motorsports enthusiast. My whole life is surrounded by motorcycles and cars and off-road race trucks and adventure. I've been racing for a very long time. I started when I was 16 years old, so that's a long time ago. It's 40 years this year. Off-road is not structured, and a certain type of person is attracted to that type of situation, kind of a sense of affronting the elements and taking on the challenge head-on and accepting responsibilities for your own action. The very first rally I did was actually the granddaddy of all rallies, the Dakar in 2001. The Dakar Rally, for a person like me, it's a pinnacle. It's like climbing Mount Everest. I was fortunate enough to be the first Canadian to finish the Dakar Rally. The race itself was 21 days. It has a rest day in between, and the first 3 or 4 days were in Europe, so you spent a lot of time on paved roads. But the real action began on the 4th day in Morocco, and from there on it's camping in a tent and riding up to 500, 600 kilometers a day off-road. The Dakar has a full gamut of extreme conditions. I mean, we started in Paris, France, in basically zero degrees and raining, to very, very hot conditions in Mauritania, the Sahara Desert, 40 degrees, somewhere like that. And everything in between, sandstorms and long distances, and of course falls, and dealing with none of the modern amenities that we enjoy here in Canada. I actually went back in 2010 to South America in an off-road race truck. No Canadian has it finished on 4 wheels. So it would be really nice to become the first Canadian to finish on 4 wheels. So I set my sights on that. My friends and I worked very hard at putting together a pretty interesting off-road race track. My off-road race truck is based on a Mason Motorsports Pro Runner. It's a tube chassis, purpose-built off-road truck. I mean, it's my own design as far as how it's equipped. The truck has a VW turbo diesel engine and a Toyota transmission. It has a Chevy Colorado body on it, and it's equipped according to the FIA rulebook as far as being prepared for rally goes. We put it together, and fingers crossed we'll have good luck with it. The Baja 1000 has been going on for more than 40 years. It started back in '67. And it takes place in Baja, Mexico, which is a really interesting spot. Not only does it lend itself very nicely to that type of race, which is a start-finish non-stop race. It's usually 1,000 miles. And for the desert racing community in southwestern states, it's the pinnacle for them. I've been down to Baja quite a few times. It's more of a team effort. We have up to 24 people supporting it. Because it's non-stop, you have to go from pit stop to pit stop, and you always have to have a crew there. So being a crew member is almost as challenging as being a driver or co-driver. Baja is really the Wild West. Just exciting parts of flying through the desert at 85 miles an hour, hitting huge bumps, flying through the air, sand and dirt and dust coming through the windshield. Motorcycling, you can hurt yourself, and you have to realize that every time I let the clutch out, I remind myself that this is a dangerous thing that I'm going to be getting into, and you have to ride accordingly. The speeds are very, very high, and a lot of things get broken, and a lot of crashes occur and things like that. All sorts of mayhem occurs. That's what off-road racing's all about. The sensation of riding or driving is unbelievable. I mean, very little compares to flying across, the desert in an off-road race truck, V8 500 horsepower race truck. I mean, that is a sensation that's really a rush of adrenaline. It's a little bit like a drug. I'm so thankful and appreciative of my incredible opportunities that I've been given and had to experience life and have a really interesting life.
After the break on Big Life, meet a young man from the streets of Jamaica whose passion for animals helped him create one of his country's first winter dog sledding teams. For Damien Robb, growing up in Jamaica meant a life without thoughts of snow or cold weather. As an adult, there would be a dramatic change. Not only would Robb experience a Canadian winter, he would do so as a musher for one of Jamaica's first dog sledding teams.
My name is Damien Robb, and I'm a musher for the Jamaican dog sled team. A lot of persons don't know what musher is. I work with sled dogs and actually take care of them. This was Danny Melville's idea, who is the owner of Chaka Caribbean Adventure Tour, which is a tour company in Jamaica, of course. And he was out looking for new adventure tours for his company. So he went to Edmonton, Alberta, where he had some new dune buggies made, which is a new tour for his operation. So as soon as he went there, he saw a rig that was a little bit different than the dune buggies with no engine and stuff. So that rig was used for a dryland dog sled tour. So right there and then, he thought that might be a good tour for his company, because we have so much dogs in Jamaica, stray of course. So he just came back and decided he's going to do a dog sled tour there. I've been doing this 4 years now. I become one of their mushers when I saw it advertising on my television. I thought that was so awesome, because as a kid you never hear about dryland dog sledding, the little bit you have heard about dog sledding, right? So I didn't even know what the job was, but I just want to be a part of the team. And when we first started out, we didn't have no experience what to do other than take care of the dogs. So this is why we get to come abroad to train and compete, learn other stuff from mushers so we could take that back home to apply to our team in Jamaica. Today we will be racing in Halliburton, of course, and I will be running the 4-dog team and the 6-dog team, which is a sprint open class. This race is one of the biggest also, the Halliburton Highlands. What I'm hoping to gain is more experience to learn more stuff from other mushers, which would help you to become more professional at what you do. It's very competitive and the trail here is very nice and pretty as like always, and being as it's so competitive, like I always rank in the top 10, so I feel so good about it.
Jamaican dog sled team.
The dogs are actually different, like you use the purebred Siberian Huskies for the long distance races and the sprint races, like you use the Alaskan Huskies. They go much more faster, like 20 miles per hour, and like for the long distance races you just want to go like 10 miles per hour because you have so much distance to cover and stuff. We got our dogs from the JSPCA, which is the Jamaica Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. So those are actually rescue dogs we train to become sled dogs, and they really love what they do because some of them are like second chance at life, because we have dogs that we're gonna put down and we take them to our kennel. They get so much affection and they're happy and they love it. Well, my favorite thing about being a musher is actually take care of the dogs and actually see the dogs happy and they love what they're doing.